Atop a cliff under the full moon, a man praises Jin So-un's impressive memory. Jin So-un is badly wounded and says that everything happened thanks to the other man. The mysterious man reveals that all the records of the Miram Alliance have finally been restored. This man is Yong Soa, the leader of the Miram Alliance, who coldly thanks him for his services. Kneeling and bleeding, Jin So-un laments that he did it all just by following his orders. He asks furiously if the reward for all his dedication will be just a humiliating end. Yong Soa draws his sword, saying that a brilliant mind would be dangerous if it sided with the demonic cult. He points the blade and states that for the justice and safety of the Alliance, Jin So-un and his memories must disappear. Faced with the threat of his demise, Jin So-un just lets out a sarcastic laugh upon hearing about that cause. The captain laughs loudly and questions what danger the decaying Miram Alliance would be in if he remained alive. He scoffs, saying the Alliance has already lost to the cult and can barely survive, so talking about danger is a joke. Yong Soa retorts with extreme seriousness, stating that they will still defeat the enemy and rise again. Jin So-un scoffs, recalling that the leaders fled north, sacrificing countless innocent people as shields. He admits that, seeing the rush to eliminate people for a cause, it's hard to tell the Alliance apart from the cult itself. The Alliance leader is deeply shaken. Upon hearing those words about the Tail sect, Jin So-un approaches the edge of the cliff and bitterly regrets entrusting his life to such filthy hands. He raises his blood-stained hand and decides to make one last decision on his own. With a smile on his face, he throws himself into the abyss, determined to be the one responsible for his own end. As he falls into the darkness, he reflects that having a perfect memory turned his life into a living hell. He recalls when the Great War began, and he was recruited along with his companions from his small sect. Faced with the enemy's strength, the leaders fled and used the weaker warriors as disposable shields. To save his disciples, he accepted the desperate offer to memorize all the Alliance's records. Lying on the ground, he thinks he should have focused on training his martial arts instead of just reading books. He curses the heavens for giving him the gift of a perfect memory instead of power or internal energy. As his end nears, a bracelet on his bloodied wrist begins to glow intensely. In his last breaths, he deeply wishes he had the strength to protect all of his people. Suddenly, angry voices emerge, asking if Jin So-un really passed out, and if that was all he had. Someone pokes his head with a wooden sword and mocks him, saying that his own disciples could take more. Feeling the pain, the young man grips the handle of his weapon, cursing his memory that insists on recording everything. He tries to get up as the physical agony begins to overwhelmingly take over his mind. Jin So-un lets out a desperate scream upon realizing his incredible memory now makes him recall even physical pain. Upon opening his eyes, he is completely confused to see several youths in uniform gathered around him. Looking around in disbelief, he notices something extremely familiar about the place where he's lying. The young man realizes he is in the training yard of the Tail sect, exactly as it was in the past. Two disciples watch his reaction with expressions full of surprise and concern. Jin So-un's heart races, and he blushes as he finally understands what is happening. Without wasting any time, the young man starts running towards the companions he thought he had lost forever. Overcome with emotion, he throws himself into the arms of the two disciples and hugs them with all his might. He calls out to Hong, who gets extremely embarrassed and asks what on earth her senior is doing. He also hugs Junpyo, who is confused by the sudden gesture and asks if something is wrong. The other disciples start whispering among themselves, thinking their senior ate something bad or went crazy. Jin So-un begins to cry with relief at seeing everyone alive, thinking it's just an illusion before his passing. He cracks a warm smile and thanks his memory for at least letting him see those faces one last time. The two youths still don't understand any of his dramatic and affectionate reaction. He pinches Hong's cheeks, saying she was cute as a child and that he even misses her lectures. Then he squeezes Junpyo and jokes about the time the boy used to wet the bed, leaving him embarrassed. A harsh voice interrupts the moment, asking if Jin So-un is faking madness out of fear of their duel. The guy demands he grab his sword, threatening to go after the disciples if he refuses the fight. Seeing his rival, the young man mentally complains that his final illusion could have spared him him this guy's presence. That was Jai Chil, young, a rich kid who used duels as an excuse to beat up the sect's disciples. Jinso decides to accept the duel once and for all, remembering how they suffered in silence, afraid of losing their sponsorship. He strikes a confident pose and decides to use this supposed final illusion to get revenge on his old rival. The opponent becomes visibly furious at the smile and mocking tone the young man shows him. Completely enraged, the rich kid charges forward at high speed with his wooden sword ready to strike. Jinso just watches him approach with impressive serenity and very attentive eyes. He moves calmly as he recalls the movements of the sword technique that used to defeat him in the past. It was a wild art taught in secret by a famous wandering swordsman hired by the rival's family. He remembers that his rival always aimed for the eyes, and though he knew the moves, he previously lacked the strength to react. However, compared to the terrifying warriors of the demonic cult he faced, his rival's attacks seem far too slow. The adversary's eyes widen as he realizes his fastest strike was dodged with extreme ease. All of this is nothing compared to the thousands of deadly techniques he was forced to memorize at the risk of his life. Suddenly, Jinso decides to attack using a legendary sword technique he had memorized in the future. As his opponent desperately charges, the perfect movements of the sword technique form clearly in the protagonist's mind. His eyes shine brightly as he executes the technique with surgical and lethal precision. With a single, graceful move, he unleashes a devastating blow that cuts through the air toward his opponent. The rival is struck square in the head and spits blood, in disbelief at seeing that legendary combat technique being used. The adversary falls in total agony and astonishment, while Jinso laughs softly, feeling enormous satisfaction. He feels reinvigorated for finally managing to defeat that bully using his own sect's technique. The final impact knocks the insolent young man down for good, providing an unbelievable sense of relief and triumph. Everyone around watches the scene in complete silence, unable to believe the speed of that counter-attack. The defeated young man stumbles and leans on his own sword, letting out groans of pain as the dust begins to settle. His sectmates are dumbfounded to see that he actually cracked the head of the powerful Merchant Association's son. Bloodied and humiliated, the rich kid shouts with all his might that this isn't over. He tries to get up, consumed by irrational hatred, demanding that the protagonist pay dearly for what he just did. However, before he can do anything, the bully collapses unconscious in front of a confused Jinso. One of the young female disciples watches the aggressor fall with wide eyes, almost unable to speak. The little ones begin to celebrate cheerfully, confessing that they used to think their senior was a bit pathetic and cowardly. The protagonist feels great satisfaction seeing the smiles on the faces of all the kids from his beloved sect. He thanks the heavens for this illusion, happy to be able to thrash his rival before finally passing on in peace. Just as he starts to relax, a powerful punch lands square on his face, shattering the peaceful moment. It's the young Hong who yells furiously, asking if he has truly gone mad to do something so crazy. She desperately questions what they will do if the influential Merchant Association cuts off their vital sponsorship. Jinso feels his cheek sting from the blow and realizes things are too real to be a simple illusion. He lets out a cry of shock as he finally deduces that this situation is not a mere memory before his passing. Faced with his desperation, Hong just gives a slightly sarcastic smile as she plans her next move. She lands another heavy blow on him, telling him to stop talking nonsense and take responsibility for what he did. The young man falls on his back, completely dazed by the consecutive physical attacks he just suffered. While the others try to revive him, the young man finally accepts the absurd reality that he has truly returned to the past. In a quiet room, several wooden drawers of a medicine cabinet suggest he was taken to the infirmary. Lying in a relaxed manner, he rests with bandages on his face to treat the injuries from Hong's punches. He takes advantage of the quiet place to organize his thoughts and try to figure out how this time travel happened. He recalls that in his original timeline, the whole tragedy began with the resurgence of the demonic cult. The defeat in the subsequent war destroyed the alliance and brought his own sect to the brink of complete ruin. In those dark times, his incredible ability to memorize ended up becoming the group's only hope. He was given the exhausting mission of committing to memory and restoring every one of the Muram Alliance's ancient sacred books. He pushed himself to the limit, promising to record every detail and character of those documents without making a single mistake. His only request in exchange for that colossal effort was that they spare the young disciples from going to the battlefield. In the end, the Alliance itself decided his memories were too dangerous and cowardly tried to eliminate him. He was sure he would perish in the fall, but somehow he mysteriously woke up years in the past. Furthermore, he realized that all the legendary techniques he memorized are still perfectly stored in his mind. Thanks to the martial arts manuals still left in his mind, he was able to change his destiny. He reflects that he easily defeated an opponent who, in his past life, he could have never beaten alone. Looking at his wrist, he notices that only the Jade Dragon bracelet came back with him to this era. This bracelet was a trophy from one of his rare victories against the dangerous demonic cult in the future. As he thinks about the mysterious bracelet, he hears shouts from outside demanding that he be handed over immediately. The young man quickly gets out of bed, intrigued by the hostile shouting coming from the sect's outer courtyard. A fat, very rich man bellows furiously, demanding to see who is responsible for injuring his son's head. The visitor threatens to cut off all financial sponsorship for the sect, starting this very month if they do nothing. On the other side of the door, the sect leader tries to calm the sponsor down, humbly apologizing. That loud-mouthed man is Jae-yeon-sik, the bully's father, who continues to humiliate the leader, calling the young man a country bumpkin. He hears the leader begging for forgiveness, while the rich man blames him for not educating his disciples properly. Jinso remembers how, in the future, all his companions met a tragic end in the war. The suffering and unjust ends of those he loved are still deeply etched in his memories. Now that he has been given a second chance at life, he is fully determined not to let this tragedy happen again. He recalls his own tragic passing in the past and swears that this time, things will be completely different. With fury in his eyes, the young man bites and breaks the piece of wood he had in his mouth to ease the pain. He stretches and begins to prepare to go and settle things personally with the arrogant sponsor. With a mysterious object in hand, he knows exactly which card to play to turn the tables in his favor. With a sharp and calculating gaze, he decides that the perfect moment to cause a big commotion has arrived. In the courtyard, the young woman thanks him for his supposed generosity as the rich man walks away, huffing with arrogance. Jae-yeon-sik grumbles irritably, saying he'll only let it slide this time out of pure condescension. Suddenly, a calm voice from the rooftop announces that he heard the man was looking for him. He ironically introduces himself as the insignificant country bumpkin and smiles mockingly at the rich merchant. The merchant and his guard are completely stunned to see the young man standing on the roof with such audacity. Jinso leaps from the roof, landing nimbly right in front of the man, who quickly recognizes him and becomes enraged. The young man sighs with disdain and questions why he's being insulted by someone who isn't even that much older. The rich merchant is utterly confused by the lack of respect and audacity of this young disciple. He ironically says it's ridiculous to make a scene over a mere blow to the head during a formal duel. The man shouts that his son was the victim of a cowardly trick and that the entire sect should just serve the boy. Bored, Jinso retorts, reminding him that several other boys were bedridden for days after being beaten by his son. He adopts a dark tone and says the merchant is the one daydreaming if he thinks his incompetent son will get into the academy. The rich merchant begins to tremble with rage and screams in indignation, while his subordinate hastily tries to calm him down. He points his finger furiously, asking if the boy thinks he can handle the consequences if the sponsorship is cut. Faced with all that fury and financial threat, the young man just offers a small, mysterious smile. The man guffaws, saying their sect is broke, and that without his help, they'll all be starving by tomorrow. That sect was once great, but it lost all its glory and today only holds onto the prestige of its old name. However, as an official member, the sect still holds the exclusive right to recommend a disciple without needing an exam. That's why the merchant's son joined them, paying a fortune just to get that special spot at the academy. Jinso unchallengingly approaches the merchant and calmly tells him to go ahead and cut the sponsorship. He guarantees he'll take full responsibility, but says he's extremely curious about one specific detail. Grabbing the man's arm tightly, he reminds him that the Academy's special selection is less than a year away. The young man laughs, asking if his son was rejected by all the other major sects for being incompetent. The merchant breaks out in a cold, angry sweat at the accurate taunt, unable to deny that his son indeed had no talent. With hands trembling in indignation, the man stammers, asking if the insolent boy knows who he's talking to. Out of his mind, he bellows that the Alliance doesn't even care about their failed sect anymore, and that he is their only salvation. Jinso unjust stares at him with disdain, knowing all too well the schemes the merchant used in the past. He gets closer and whispers in his ear that it's actually the sect that's saving his family's reputation. The man's eyes widen in shock as he realizes the young man knows exactly what his biggest weakness is. Without giving him time to respond, the protagonist simply turns his back and begins to walk calmly away. The merchant stands there, trembling and speechless. Finally understanding that he no longer has control of the situation, the merchant bellows, calling the boy insolent, but is interrupted by his own guard who tries to hold him back. With a relentless look, he reveals to himself that this cold determination was what he learned upon his demise. Shortly after, he comically realizes he acted on impulse and hasn't planned out his next steps in detail yet. The sun begins to set over the mountains, bringing a new night and more time for him to plan his future. In front of a mysterious cave hidden among the rocks, glowing roots indicate the presence of something special inside. He enters the dark cave focused on his one and only main goal right now, which is to become infinitely stronger. The young man knows that his current sect's basic techniques won't be enough, leaving only one path forward. He needs to find the legendary 10,000-year-old fire herb to obtain a colossal amount of pure internal energy. The detailed location of all the herbs from the Alliance's secret book is perfectly etched in his brilliant mind. However, he finds a monstrous creature guarding the place, much worse than the descriptions in the old books. Knowing the risks, he prepares with determination, as obtaining that sacred herb is the first step of his journey. He advances swiftly, delivering a strike with his wooden sword to try and immobilize the monster in a single blow, but he quickly gives up on the idea, remembering that his current strength is too weak to waste energy in direct combat. Instead of using brute force, the young man decides to light a makeshift torch to use against the terrible creature. He smiles mischievously, realizing that intelligence can be a much more lethal weapon than any fine sword. The young man learned from books that a good warrior doesn't need sharp swords if he can use the environment to his advantage. The multi-eyed monster panics when it sees the fire spreading rapidly, surrounding it with no chance of escape. He watches the creature get consumed by the flames, convinced that winning by any means necessary is what truly matters. After the victorious battle, he clenches his fist and silently gives thanks for completing that difficult stage. He celebrates enthusiastically, knowing this is the first step to surpassing all the corrupt leaders of the Alliance. The terrible beast finally lies defeated on the cave floor, with a stake driven directly into its monstrous head. In the center of the lair, a natural stone pedestal holds the rare and valuable reward he was so desperately seeking. The young man approaches the altar, lit by a sliver of natural light, contemplating the prize that will change his life for good. He looks at his own hands after consuming the mystical herb, expecting to feel the immediate flow of legendary internal energy. Suddenly, he screams in despair upon realizing the result wasn't what he expected, and that this is still not enough. He laments that even after devouring the entire plant, root and all, his body couldn't absorb all the divine energy. He comically cries, blaming his sect's outdated techniques and wondering if he's the real useless one here. He slams his hand on the stone floor in frustration, unable to hide his deep disappointment with the result. He knows that if he continues at this slow pace, he will never be able to prevent the great tragedies to come. Alone in the darkness of the cave, he realizes with anguish that he won't be able to protect the dear people of his sect. His memories once again focus on the beginning of the terrible and bloody war that wiped out all his friends in the future. He swears to himself that this time he will prevent the younger warriors from being used as mere cannon fodder. To save them, the only alternative is to climb the ranks of the Miram Alliance and gain influence before the conflict begins. He clenches his fists against the stone, aware that he needs to pass the prestigious Academy's admission test in 1 year. The young man looks up with a fierce expression, knowing he absolutely cannot fail in his rescue mission. He tries to calm himself while listening to the dripping in the cave, forcing his mind to find a quick solution to evolve. Looking at his reflection in the water, a brilliant idea strikes him as he remembers the existence of spiritual pills. He recalls that his rival possessed a valuable spiritual pill that had been purchased right around this time. The rival's father spent an immense fortune to obtain the rare and powerful Silma pill directly from Mount Hua. However, one day before the boy could consume it, the precious artifact mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Since the thief's identity was never discovered, and the theft hasn't happened yet, he realizes he has a unique chance. Confident in his deductive skills, he knows that any intruder would make small mistakes and leave clues behind. The young man dives deep into his vast mental library filled with files and reports to trace the criminal's steps. He begins to analyze in detail the Miram Alliance's monthly report that recorded movements in the region. His memories quickly organize into red lines, crossing virtual shelves in search of logical connections. He speeds up the mental search, connecting mission reports and suspicious entry and exit logs from that same period. Patiently, the young man analyzes each stored document, knowing the ideal answer is hidden in his mind. He cross-references patrol data and local incidents that occurred near the Merchant Association during that period. The information begins to make sense as a red line perfectly connects the names of the suspects. He finally puts all the pieces of the mental puzzle together and pinpoints exactly where the pill will be kept. 3 names of legendary warriors emerge in his mind as the main suspects for the theft that occurred in the past. He clasps his hands, thankful for the luck of having all this strategic knowledge stored in his brain. The young man feels greatly relieved to realize that being a living library is finally bringing great advantages. He decides he will steal the Silma pill before the real thief does, to use it for his own spiritual benefit. Suddenly, the mystical bracelet on his wrist begins to glow intensely and emit waves of mysterious power. The young man looks startled at the body of the defeated spider, noticing that something very strange is happening. He notices with intrigue that the Jade Dragon bracelet is glowing non-stop in a way he had never seen before. A thick, black smoke begins to emerge from the bracelet, startling the young man with its unknown energy. Claws of mystical energy advance on the dead monster, tearing the spiritual essence directly from its chest. The hidden forces envelop the creature's glowing red core, sucking all its power relentlessly. The monster's life energy is completely drained and directed at high speed toward the artifact on his wrist. He shouts in shock as he realizes the bracelet is absorbing and purifying the energy from the monstrous spider's core. Outside the cave, the morning calm continues as small birds fly freely across the sky under the sunlight. Sitting on the dark floor, the young man meditates as the purified red energy begins to merge with his body. He feels the immense spiritual force being absorbed and circulating calmly through all his internal energy channels. His eyes open, shining with an intense blue light, indicating that the fusion process was a complete success. He lets out a hysterical laugh of happiness upon realizing the power in his fists has increased unbelievably. He remembers the bracelet was a magical relic of the blood-sucking demon he had defeated in the future. The young man kept the artifact only as a war memento, not knowing it had the ability to absorb souls. Curious to test his new power, he clenches his fist and throws a quick punch into the air to measure his strength. The punch generates a devastating shockwave that shatters the surrounding rocks and makes the entire cave tremble with the impact. He realizes the monster's purified energy has mixed perfectly with his mental technique, multiplying his strength. With a victorious smile, he thanks the heavens, realizing he now has the power needed to start fighting back. Meanwhile, a grand party with red lantern celebrates the very expensive pill acquired by the association's leader. The recovered rival proudly displays the mystical pill that promises to boost his internal energy to surreal levels. He continues to boast about the item's rarity, while the young Hong watches him from the courtyard with visible boredom. Hong Saryeon rests her chin on her hand thoughtfully, very worried about the sudden disappearance of her dear sect companion. Her eyes reveal a deep melancholy as she recalls a significant moment that happened on this very date. She remembers when her companion took the blame in the past, claiming to be solely responsible for the sect's fate. In that original timeline, Jinso ended up being forced to leave the group due to all the pressure from the merchant. The bully continues to laugh loudly and insult Jinso, calling him a cowardly fool in front of the entire assembled sect. Suddenly, one of the young disciples runs cheerfully towards her, holding a plate full of tasty food. The little boy offers the roasted meat with a huge smile on his face, completely breaking the melancholic mood. The little ones surround the young woman, showering her with affection, while the rival watches the scene from afar with great hatred and disdain. He walks away, grumbling that he'll teach those meddling brats a harsh lesson as soon as the banquet is over. Hong smiles sweetly at the children and thanks them for their kindness in bringing the meal to the courtyard. One of the girls starts teasing the young woman, asking if she was thinking about her missing senior once again. The little ones joke that she always gets quiet when she thinks about him, leaving her completely red with embarrassment. The boys suggest saving some rice cakes and meat for their senior, as they know he hasn't had dinner yet. Seeing the little one's great loyalty and consideration for the young man, she can't help but smile with pride. To hide her emotion, she lets out a giant, loud burp that leaves all the little boys shocked and surprised. She laughs playfully, threatening to eat all their food if they keep dawdling. Startled by the joke, the boys begin to devour their plates as fast as they can in a very comical scene. As everyone has fun, she wonders to herself what the protagonist is up to so far away. Under the beautiful sunset decorated with glowing lanterns, she mentally calls him an idiot with great affection. Night finally falls on the luxurious mansion of the Merchant Association, illuminated by dozens of festive lanterns. The rival's proud father makes a solemn toast before all the guests, celebrating his family's great achievement. Jai Chil Young drinks cheerfully with his friends, completely intoxicated by the luxury and the false sense of victory. Beautiful dancers perform in the center of the main hall, twirling pink ribbons in an elegant traditional dance. While the party goes on inside, mysterious figures move with extreme agility across the dark roof tiles of the mansion. Suddenly, a masked intruder appears, jumping from the top of the roof in an extremely agile and stealthy manner. He uses his incredible movement skills to glide through the air and quickly escape the guard's sight. The criminal lets out a muffled laugh from behind his mask, very proud of the initial success of his escape plan. This man is Ju Jong Muk, who scoffs at the association's pitiful security while holding the pill from Mount Hoa. He hastily opens the jewelry box to behold the mystical and mesmerizing glow of the valuable mystical elixir. The soul hunter begins to tremble with pure excitement upon realizing the legendary treasure now belongs to him. As he celebrates and plans to use the mystical power, he doesn't even notice Jinso on watching him silently from the bushes. But just as he decides to flee, he is surprised by a violent and relentless sword slash. The attack is so lethal that it strikes him down in a single blow, sending his body falling to the forest floor. A cold hand picks up the red case from the ground, offering fake apologies to the freshly fallen man. The new assailant shows a dark look and smiles victoriously while holding the valuable treasure in his dirty hands. He repeats his ironic taunt to the body, feeling like the most intelligent and cunning man on the entire continent. The warrior proudly states that he also desperately needs that power to achieve his goals. Days before the theft, the protagonist carefully planned his trap by visiting a hunting shop. He entered the rustic establishment, focused on getting the necessary equipment for his secret plan. The local merchant looked up and stared at him in surprise, noticing the presence of such an unusual and young customer. Jinso explained that he came after hearing rumors that the man sold rare and very dangerous goods. The young man asked directly if he had lethal traps specifically designed to capture people. The hunter found the request quite unusual but smirked, considering the boy a very interesting customer. 2. He guaranteed he had the best equipment in the region, capable of taking down anything from small rabbits to giant bears. Jinso placed a heavy bag of coins on the counter and asked for the meanest tiger traps he had. He demanded an extremely sensitive mechanism, strong enough to rip off a bear's leg with ease. The young man smiled devilishly, imagining that his traps could send his targets straight to the afterlife. The experienced merchant felt a terrible shiver down his spine and hesitated a bit before closing the deal. Back in the present in the forest, the new assailant admires the mystical case, unaware of the danger lurking in the dark. He scoffs at the soul hunter, saying he expected a much tougher fight against someone so famous in the Jiangyu. The swordsman displays a greedy and wicked smile, having the legendary pill finally secure in his hands. Right behind him, calm footsteps reveal the approach of his sect companions, congratulating him on his success. The two warriors laugh together, boasting about how easy it was to deceive and take out the original thief of the case. They talk coldly about how to hide the body, so the hunter will just be considered missing. But before cleaning up, the accomplice suggests they take a quick look at the legendary mystical pill in the box. Upon opening the red case, a glow of pink energy illuminates the greedy faces of both tricksters. They admire the plant's aroma, not noticing that a masked Jinso is standing right behind them, watching everything. They freeze instantly in total shock upon feeling an unknown presence breathing right beside them. The swordsman makes a desperate strike backward, but the intruder dodges with an agile leap and mocks his reflex. Jinso displays the red case in his hand, leaving his adversaries perplexed that he stole the box without them noticing. The leader shouts furiously, ordering his companion to capture the insolent intruder immediately, and without any mercy. The pursuer charges with blind fury, shouting that the protagonist will pay dearly for coveting their treasure. Running with agility, Jinso unironically asks if that shamelessness is what they teach in their sect. The young man runs between the tree trunks, shouting that they were the first to take someone out and steal the case. The pursuer tries to deliver a brutal aerial slash to cut the masked man in half once and for all. Jinso uneasily dodges by sliding on the grass as the blade only hits the ground, kicking up dust. With a malicious smile behind his mask, the young man ironically warns his enemy to watch his step. In the next instant, the pursuer's boot triggers the huge hidden iron trap, which snaps shut with extreme violence. The warrior's face contorts in absolute shock as he feels the metal claws tearing through his flesh and bones. Jinso just watches the damage with cold satisfaction, silently celebrating the success of his hunting tactic. The opponent starts to break out in a cold sweat from the agony, trying to hold back desperate screams due to the severity of the wound. An ear-splitting scream of pain echoes throughout the silent forest, completely shattering the tranquility of the night. The leader arrives running desperately as the protagonist pretends to lament that they didn't follow his friendly advice. The remaining swordsman trembles with fury and accuses him of being an insignificant coward for using such low and dirty tricks. The swordsman points his sharp blade, furiously demanding that the intruder remove his mask and reveal his true identity. The protagonist just calmly crouches down and picks up a stone from the ground while responding with pure mockery. He ironically asks if his rival really expects him to formally introduce himself according to the rules of etiquette. The small stone whizzes by and hits the grass, right next to the startled Jiumqing swordsman's feet. The precise impact of the stone triggers another giant iron trap, which snaps shut violently, causing a huge scare. He grits his teeth in terror, seeing he was just one step away from having his leg cruelly crushed. He declares himself the new owner of the mystical elixir and warns that the pair of assailants will be sent straight to prison. He reflects on how he managed to deduce the identity of the real culprits by cross-referencing the Alliance's data and reports. The young man researched historical records of warriors who had mysterious increases in internal energy during the same period. He concluded that the soul hunter had been taken out and that 2 members of Jiumqing had split the pill's effects. The leader shouts in fear, realizing the masked man knows their identities and crimes perfectly. He calmly confirms that he knows very well who the 2 cowards belonging to the famous Jiumqing sect are. The man tries to intimidate him, asking if he doesn't fear the terrible revenge of the influential Muram Alliance. The young man scoffs at the threat, saying it's ridiculous for one thief to try to report another while in the middle of a crime. Even trapped, the wounded warrior becomes enraged and tries to throw a brutal punch at the masked protagonist. The impact of the blow furiously smashes the ground, showing that his strength is still extremely destructive. The shockwave sends several other metal traps flying into the air, forcing the young man to dodge quickly. The injured opponent smiles sadistically upon seeing the lethal mechanisms scatter chaotically across the grass. Jinso uncurses mentally as he has to perform risky acrobatics to avoid getting caught by his own devices. The enemy threatens to rip off his mask and quarter him while the leader celebrates his partner's quick reaction. The protagonist remains completely silent, just observing the situation and calculating his next move. Soon after, he begins to retreat at high speed through the woods, making his adversaries believe he is fleeing. The leader orders an immediate pursuit, but his partner warns that the target is running towards the area filled with traps. The swordsman boasts that they just need to step exactly in the footprints left by the protagonist to stay safe. The accomplice praises his superior's cunning as they both leap, mimicking Jinso on steps with great skill. The frantic chase continues through the dark forest, with the duo following the tracks relentlessly and swiftly. They maintain total focus on the footprints on the foliage, believing they have completely deciphered the escape pattern. The leader laughs loudly, scorning the masked man's tricks and stating that his plan has failed miserably. However, the protagonist makes one last long leap, landing extremely lightly on a tree. He slides on the ground and adopts a defensive stance, facing the duo with a look of pure amusement from behind his mask. The 2 criminals laugh, believing they have cornered the young man, and that his life will finally end there. They leap together to deliver the final attack, not realizing the terrible surprise that awaits their landing. The protagonist watches them fall with his eyes wide in anticipation of the perfect outcome of his trap. The instant their feet touch the ground exactly on the indicated marks, the hidden trigger is activated. A cruel smile forms under Jin. So-un's mask as he sees the adversary's foolishness has sealed their fate. Several giant bear traps snap shut at the same time, crushing the legs of both swordsmen with brutal force. The leader lets out a scream of absolute terror as he realizes he fell for the most obvious and well-planned trap in the forest. Both collapse to the ground, groaning in intense pain and bleeding heavily, completely immobilized by the iron teeth. Jinso undraws his shining sword and scoffs, saying they were a little smarter than he imagined. He explains that to avoid the traps, one had to step in the exact same spot without being off by a single centimeter. The swordsman stammers in terror, saying it's impossible for anyone to have such absurd and perfect movement precision. He asks in disbelief how the young man managed to move with such accuracy in a field completely mined with dangers. The protagonist just grips the hilt of his weapon firmly, stating that the secret to it all lies in his perfect mind. He declares that his fantastic memory is the one and only divine gift he received to change the course of things. The moonlight illuminates the forest as one last merciless attack puts an end to the fate of those 2 traitors. The next day, the imposing and sunny headquarters of the Tail sect in Happy stands out under a clear blue sky. Inside the residence, a hand calmly holds a cup of hot tea while planning the next steps. Jigel Samyeon, the chief strategist of the Muram Alliance, vaguely recalls that this was one of the traditional sects. Elder Namgung Taewon agrees with a cunning smile, commenting on the emergence of stronger rival groups in the region. They coldly conclude that it's high time to replace the weakened Teal sect with a new and stronger group. The strategist asks if the sect expanding its power in the region would be the influential Iron Sword sect. The elder smiles, pouring more tea, and confirms that the rumors circulating behind the scenes of the alliance are real. Jigel recalls that an official sect can only be replaced if it commits a serious infraction against local laws. With a malicious look, the elder reveals that there are rumors that the Tail sect has been selling its special spots. Hearing that the rival sect might be using its recommendations to make money makes the strategist hesitate for a moment. He questions whether the Tail sect would really abuse its greatest privilege as one of the group's traditional members. The elder states with conviction that they would do anything crazy just to satisfy their own financial greed. He asks if the traditional sect would have the courage to turn its back on its own dignity and historical honor. The elder reiterates with disdain that their greed for money would trump any sense of honor or ancient tradition. Outside, a small bird perched on a branch silently observes the large traditional mansion at dusk. Silence reigns in the luxurious room as the two powerful men continue to plot their political plans. The elder gestures with falsehood, asking not to be misunderstood, and pretending he doesn't want to replace the sect. The chief strategist listens to him attentively, keeping his eyes half closed and analyzing his colleague's every word. The elder remembers that the privileges were granted to honor those who fought bravely in difficult times. He hypocritically states that he feels deeply saddened to see the prestigious alliance's name being tarnished. Jeagle offers the cup full of mystical tea, sealing the silent agreement between the two alliance strategists. Later that night, the protagonist sits alone in the dark courtyard under the stars to focus on his cultivation. The young man closes his eyes and concentrates his mind as blue flames of internal energy begin to envelop his body. Electrical marks of blue power appear on his muscular back, indicating the release of an immense spiritual force. He takes a deep breath, his body covered in sweat, feeling the energy channels finally expand completely. As he opens just one of his intensely glowing eyes, he realizes that the mystical advancement has been completed with total success. Sitting in a lotus position on the wooden floor, the young man controls the flow of power that emanates freely around him. He clenches his fist and celebrates, having managed to absorb the mystical pill in a short time of continuous meditation. The young man celebrates joyfully upon realizing that his current energy level has already surpassed the maximum limit of his past life. He gets dressed in a hurry and begins to descend the wooden steps of the inn in a calm and rhythmic manner. Upon entering the dining area, he spots the young rustic helper sleeping exhausted on one of the wooden tables. The boy wakes up with a start and celebrates with relief upon seeing that the young master has finally left his room. The helper confesses he was worried about him being gone for days, but the young man just asks for something to eat. The little boy laments in fear, saying the kitchen has already closed for the night due to the late hour. Jinso unsmiles slyly and places a generous pile of silver coins on the table to motivate the helper. The boy runs off happily to wake the cook, while the protagonist concludes that money solves any problem. He mentally gives thanks for having used the mystical bracelet to get that significant amount of coins. He recalls when he faced a giant wild tiger deep in the dark forest during his hunt. The mystical jade dragon bracelet proved to be extremely useful, working not just against demons and monsters. He managed to drain and absorb the wild beast's entire life force, converting it into pure internal energy for himself. To make things better, he even sold the valuable tiger pelts to the local hunter, earning a nice extra fortune. Although he's satisfied with easily raising funds, he knows there is a dangerous problem to be solved. The dragon bracelet's power is so dark that it could easily be mistaken for a demonic cult technique. He knows that using this ability carelessly in front of other warriors would be a fatally dangerous move. If members of the Miram Alliance discover he drains the essence of creatures, the consequences will be dire. He swears to himself that he will keep his biggest secret very well hidden so as not to put his entire sect at risk. His dark thoughts are interrupted by the cheerful helper, who arrives carrying plates full of hot food. The protagonist's mouth waters at the sight of the beautiful meal, and he decides it's time to devour it all without delay. He eats the noodles greedily, while the two inn helpers watch him very curiously and attentively. The boy excitedly asks if he has heard the rumors that recently started circulating around the city of Happy. He begins to narrate what happened at the lavish party of the Merchant Association that was held to celebrate the mystical pill. The boy reveals, gossiping, that the valuable treasure was stolen right in the middle of the event, making the young man nearly choke. He comments that the thief must be incredibly skilled and that the Alliance sent investigators to handle the case. Upon hearing that official investigators are after the person responsible, the young man chokes badly on his food in shock. The boy offers water, startled, while the young man tries to recover to ask what the investigators will do now. The protagonist asks if the Miram Alliance's investigation team managed to find any clues about the real thief. His eyes widen as he thinks with dread that it would be an absolute disaster if they had arrested someone in his place. But the boy reveals that the investigators quickly lost the trail and couldn't find any useful clues. Relieved, the young man lets out a sigh of gratitude in his thoughts and pretends to lament the huge loss the merchant suffered. The boy mentions that another banquet will soon be held in the region, catching the curious young man's attention. He is paralyzed with shock upon hearing that the festive event will take place at the powerful Iron Sword sect. The little one explains that the leader will celebrate his 60th birthday with a huge and luxurious 7-day party. He melancholically recalls that this significant event did indeed happen exactly during this period in his past life. The young man recalls the painful humiliation he suffered in the past during the celebrations of that same birthday at the sect. He remembers the arrogant face of the rival sect's old leader, who watched everything with a mocking and sadistic smile. On that terrible occasion, his beloved father was forced to kneel humiliatingly in front of dozens of spectators. He had to make a public apology to the leader of the Iron Sword sect, shattering all his family's pride and dignity. That whole scene of family humiliation happened because of one single person directly responsible for that terrible mistake. And that person was none other than himself, Jin So-un, who at the time was a foolish and completely inept young man. Thinking about this, the young man clenches his fist with immense force, filled with the unshakable determination to change the course of history. He makes the firm decision that, no matter the cost, no member of his sect will set foot at that cursed birthday banquet. He abruptly stands up from the table, thanking them for the food, and leaving the little helper confused by his reaction. The young man walks resolutely towards the exit, ignoring the concerned calls of the boy who tries to follow him. He swears he will never allow his father to suffer any kind of humiliation on his account in this new chance at life. However, his plans change drastically when he finds himself in the middle of a deadly confrontation at the festive event itself. The attacks collide with immense force, generating bright sparks, and making the surrounding air vibrate with the energy of the combat. He ended up involved in a life or death duel against the grandson of the Iron Sword, sect's leader himself. It all started a few days ago, when the young disciples gathered in the courtyard of the Teal sect to train. Exhausted after an intense physical exercise routine, they collapse on the stone steps with sore legs. The three Lee brothers, known for their great strength and mutual loyalty, try to catch their breath under the hot sun. One of them complains about the infernal heat and questions if training so many repetitive strikes will really help their technique. The brothers start joking, remembering that he used to praise Jin So-un's incredible combat technique. Laughing together, they admit the respect they feel for their senior and wonder what he might be doing at that moment. The youngest of the disciples shows great concern that the young man has been missing for over a week. They begin to consider if the young master might be too ashamed to return because of the trouble he caused with the rival, or if he might have abandoned the sect for good, afraid that the Merchant Association would take revenge on all the disciples. They praise the protagonist's good heart, but are surprised by a noise coming directly from the main gate. The little boy's face breaks into a huge, joyful smile as he spots the familiar figure crossing the entrance back home. Jin So-un returns victoriously to the Tail sect, carrying a huge sack full of provisions and coins on his shoulder. He walks with a firm step, remembering all the insults his group constantly suffered from their rich rivals. With a firm step on the ground, he mentally reinforces his unshakable decision not to attend that celebration. He looks at his sect's grand golden plaque and promises to restore the place's prestige with his own sweat. The young man knows that none of his companions should go to that dangerous party that only brought pain in the original past. As he thinks of a good excuse to avoid the trip, he is spotted by the little ones who start shouting his name. The three Lee brothers run happily to meet him, showing how much they missed his leadership and presence. They all gather around him, joyfully begging him to teach them the fantastic fighting techniques he used. Smiling warmly, he ruffles the children's hair and playfully asks if they all behaved well while he was gone. All the joyful celebration is suddenly interrupted by a thunderous and authoritarian shout from behind them. That imposing man is his father, Jin Tae-san, the leader of the outer hall, who stares at him with his arms crossed seriously. Seeing his father alive and well, Jin-so-un becomes extremely emotional and begins to cry with pure joy and relief. He runs to throw himself into his father's arms, celebrating the wonders that this new chance at life has brought. However, instead of a warm hug, the master gives him a knock on the head, demanding an explanation for the mess. He bellows furiously, reminding him that the sect almost went bankrupt due to the huge trouble the boy caused with the merchants. The news of the protagonist's return spreads quickly and soon reaches the ears of the furious and recovered rival. The bully challenges him to a fair rematch, demanding that he show if he really has the courage to face him without tricks. Jin-so-un gives an extremely wicked smile as he sees his opponent falling right into his psychological trap. He pretends to be blinded by the rival's brilliance, putting on an exaggerated drama to irritate and destabilize his adversary. He mocks him, saying the opponent's aura is too bright and that he could never win against someone strengthened by that pill. The adversary trembles with pure hatred and humiliation upon realizing the protagonist knows all about the stolen elixir. The rival walks away furiously while Hong scolds the young man for provoking someone whose precious elixir was just stolen. The two watch Jin-so-un with suspicion and comment on how strangely he has been acting lately. To the general delight of the sect's children, the young master opens his sack, revealing delicious and colorful sweets. Hong complains about him wasting money on nonsense instead of rice, while the children happily attack the food. Hong Sarian approaches and quietly asks him not to disappear anymore. Touching his heart with her sincere concern, she explains that the rivals have been very busy and asks him to stop trying to carry all the problems by himself. With a blushing face, she demands that the protagonist promise to never again disappear so suddenly and mysteriously. Jin-so-un is left completely speechless and blushes with embarrassment at such a display of affection from his colleague. He finds the situation amusing, knowing that he wasn't actually carrying any burden, but decides not to spoil the moment. However, the young man is startled to hear that the entire Tail sect is indeed planning to attend the Iron Sword banquet. The young man laments, learning that the decision has already been made, and that refusing the formal invitation would be a great offense. He knows he needs to urgently find a plausible excuse to prevent everyone from traveling to the celebration. At that moment, his father walks past them decisively. Catching the attention of everyone in the sect's courtyard, the hall master announces that he will go to the event alone to represent the group and orders everyone else to stay. Jin-so-un is very confused by his father's sudden action. Not understanding the reason for his drastic decision, the little boy approaches timidly and holds out his hands, offering the crumpled piece of rice cake he saved for his friend. The two seniors are surprised to recognize the rice cake that was distributed at the rival's lavish banquet. The little one explains with embarrassment that he saved the sweet with care to eat together, thinking he should now throw it away. The protagonist is deeply moved by the boy's pure gesture of having resisted temptation just to wait for him. With a tender and sincere smile on his face, he gladly accepts the simple gift from his dear youngest disciple. Without any hesitation, the young master throws the rice cake into his mouth all at once, leaving his colleague horrified. He chews happily, praising the delicious taste, while the little boy complains that he ate it all by himself. He apologizes with a laugh and makes it up to the little one by offering all his expensive sweets and treats in exchange for the cake. The little boy's eyes light up with happiness, unable to contain his excitement at the wonderful exchange of prizes. Hong grumbles that the cake must have been hard and old, but the young man just watches her with a calm and serene look. He reflects that even if they avoid this party, the rival sect will continue to send invitations to humiliate them in the future. With a new resolution in mind, he states that they cannot keep running away and suffering in silence for the rest of their lives. He refuses to accept that his dear companions and defenseless children have to endure endless insults. With a bold and determined smile on his face, he decides that they will all indeed go to the Iron Sword banquet. On the great day of the mystical celebration, a huge and luxurious caravan of carriages advances towards the enemy temple. Upon arriving at the main courtyard of the rival palace, the members of the Tail sect walk together under watchful eyes. The protagonist observes the large and intimidating plaque of the rival sect while listening to his superior's advice. Master Kang Chae-suk severely warns the young man, furiously demanding that he not do anything rash. The boy playfully asks if his superior came to the banquet, just to keep a close eye on him the whole time. The master retorts irritably, reminding him of how much the young man insisted on joining the caravan at the last minute. The merchant also scolds his son, firmly ordering him to maintain his composure and avoid starting new fights. His beloved father remains in total and absolute silence, walking with his arms crossed and a very serious expression. The young man notices with concern that his father hasn't uttered a single word since they decided to come to this cursed event. Master Kang gives the boy another knock on the head, complaining that he's been too cheeky and talking back too much. Suddenly, the firm and authoritarian footsteps of another group of warriors interrupt their friendly conversation in the courtyard. A man in green robes approaches with arrogance, demanding that they make way for his group to pass. The sect's disciples are outraged to see these unknown guys trying to cut the line at the event. Master Kang points his finger furiously and accuses the rival of being shamelessly disrespectful for cutting in front of everyone. Another warrior tries to calm things down, falsely justifying that they just sent a companion ahead because they were tired. This man is Gu Yang, leader of a much-feared merchant clan in the region, who adopts an arrogant posture. The merchant and his son tremble with fear upon recognizing the dangerous name of the association. While the protagonist watches silently, the merchant stammers in terror and quickly makes way, offering 1,000 apologies to the powerful Cheongjik Association. Jin-so unwatches them with a very serious and focused gaze, coldly storing that important name in his mind. He remembers that in the future, that young man and his rival would become very cruel and inseparable allies at the academy. That wicked duo used to humiliate and treat all the sect's disciples like their personal slaves. The intruders whisper, laughing and mocking the fat merchant's desperation and the humble uniform of the Tail sect. Master Kang and his father listen to the insults in silence, swallowing their pride in the face of the rivals' malicious comments. Suddenly, Jin-so comes up from behind and firmly places his hands on the shoulders of the merchant and his son. He pretends he has never heard of the association and asks with extreme mockery for the leader to repeat the group's name. Gu Yang turns abruptly with an enraged and disbelieving expression in the face of such audacity and disrespect. The fat merchant panics completely and stammers, trying to smooth over the embarrassing situation the boy created. The other warriors around begin to whisper, very scared of the dangerous turn the conversation has taken. Jin-so lets out a scandalous laugh and says he probably saw that name written on a bathroom wall. The association members are completely shocked and paralyzed by the direct insult uttered by the young man. Consumed by hatred, the rival leader Telly grips the hilt of his shining sword, ready to attack the protagonist. He draws his weapon, delivering a swift blow, and shouts furiously that he will cut the insolent young man in half for his insolence. However, firm steps and the elegant sound of female shoes on the floor suddenly interrupt the imminent combat. The attacker freezes his strike just inches from Jin-so's face, who remains motionless and completely serene. A beautiful and mysterious young woman appears, attracting everyone's attention, and is recognized as the famous song Moran. With a cold and sharp voice, she questions the warriors about the reason for so much commotion in her grandfather's temple. She looks at them with disdain and asks if they really came to the birthday party just to spill blood. That was the Iron Sword sect, one of the most ruthless and influential forces that emerged in the martial world. The real problem was that both factions were vying for political and territorial dominance of the same city, Hefei. The rival's ambition was to completely destroy the Tail sect to steal its special spot among the great sects. In the past, the rival leader's grandson humiliated the protagonist during the youth banquet and forced him into a duel. It was precisely after this failed duel that his beloved father had to kneel before everyone to ask for forgiveness. He knows that this time things must be different and that there is no room for failure in his defense strategy. Back in the present, the beautiful purple-haired young woman demands to know the reason for all the commotion immediately. She stares coldly at the association's swordsman, leaving him visibly intimidated by her immense authority. The rival lowers his trembling weapon and tries to stammer a lame excuse, blaming the protagonist for the provocation. However, she cuts him off firmly, warning that the sect does not accept line cutters and tells him to go to the back. Then, she formally introduces herself as Song Moran and offers a sincere apology to everyone present for the scene. As compensation for the trouble, the young woman offers to personally escort the protagonist's group inside. They all begin to walk together through the luxurious main corridor of the enemy temple. Under the leadership of the influential young woman, the rival tries to woo the beautiful young woman, showering her with exaggerated compliments about her stunning and graceful appearance. She accepts the compliment with a polite smile, but remains focused on guiding the guests to the main party hall. The protagonist is suspicious of her attitude, remembering that in the original timeline they never had any contact. He wonders if she has some hidden interest behind the friendly and unexpected reception they received. Upon entering the place, Hong Saryan whispers in amazement at the colossal size and grandeur of that enemy sect. The young man concludes that this absurd growth didn't happen by chance and decides he just needs to watch in silence. The grand party hall is completely packed with important guests, drinking and laughing merrily at the banquet. In the center of the altar, the feared leader Song Chin, Wol and his son drink with pomp, celebrating the family's great glory. The merchant and the masters of the Tail sect approach the altar, bowing humbly to greet the hosts. The young leader receives them with a boisterous laugh, treating the rich merchant and his son like great friends. They begin to talk loudly and laugh mockingly, completely ignoring the presence of the Tail sect masters. The host spews venom, commenting on the unfair privilege that the weak sect still holds before the Miram Alliance. Song Moran interrupts the provocation and politely introduces the leaders of the Tail sect to her proud father. The young leader looks down on him with a half-closed gaze of pure arrogance and undisguised superiority. Jinso, Un's father and Master Kang bow cordially, introducing themselves according to the Alliance's protocol. Suddenly, the host mentions a mysterious incident that occurred over 20 years ago involving the young man's father. Jinso, Un's eyes widen in confusion, having no clue what that secret from his father's past could be. As they walk, the rival master mockingly asks how Leader Hong's health is and who these young people might be. He looks at them with disdain, stating that neither of them seems to have a bright or promising future in the martial world. The rival scoffs, saying you can't expect anything good from the basic training of the weak Tail sect. Song Moran listens in silence to his malicious comments about how it would be a waste of time to focus on that technique. The rival master lets out a cruel laugh, saying the young man would end up becoming just a third-rate fighter, but his arrogance is suddenly broken by a bold statement from Jinso, that catches everyone's attention in the room. The young man comments in a mocking tone that every word coming from that man's mouth is incredibly irritating and empty. The opponent explodes with fury and shouts, asking what kind of nonsense the insolent young man is saying. Jinso pretends to apologize ironically, claiming he only meant to think that, not say it out loud. Master Kang hastily scolds the young man, ordering him to stop causing trouble with the influential hosts. Ignoring the scolding, the protagonist asks very seriously about what really happened 20 years ago. His beloved father remains silent and thoughtful, wearing an expression of deep sadness on his face. Master Kang gulps and looks away, showing that this matter from the past is extremely painful. Suddenly, Song Moran approaches with a sweet smile and suggests guiding them to the best seats in the grand hall. The master accepts the generous offer with relief and gestures for the others to follow him quickly without delay. They are led to a luxurious VIP table that offers a beautiful and peaceful panoramic view of the garden lake. At the table, extremely expensive dishes and delicacies are served, which they would never have the chance to try at their sect. The young man accepts the meal and directly asks why the rival leader's daughter is sitting with them. She laughs delicately, saying that the women of her traditional sect do not get involved in diplomatic matters. The rival master has two talented children, the older being the arrogant and merciless Song Mo Hyon, and the younger daughter is the beautiful Song Moran, who hides immense combat skill behind her delicacy. The older brother always monopolized all the family's training resources to secure his position as heir. However, even starting her training late, she proved to be so brilliant that she earned her own spot in the academy. The protagonist devours a chicken leg, while commenting that her cunning is considered far superior to her brother's. She laughs, flattered, asking if the young man was so interested in her that he researched her life. She apologizes for her father's hostile behavior earlier, trying to maintain a friendly atmosphere at the table. They continue to chat casually while the other disciples watch the banquet from afar. Suddenly, the protagonist stops his meal and adopts a serious tone, looking the beautiful young woman in the eyes. He asks bluntly what the real secret intention was behind the formal invitation sent to his sect. Faced with Jin So-eun's direct and sharp question, the young hostess just offers an enigmatic and silent smile. She replies that banquets are only for gathering great warriors and celebrating special moments in harmony. He retorts coldly, reminding her that historically, most great betrayals occurred at parties like this one. The young woman narrows her eyes at the protagonist's sharp response, showing that she underestimated him at first. She stands up, praising his intelligence, and says goodbye, claiming that her free time has unfortunately run out. She bids farewell to everyone with a flawless and graceful bow before leaving the sect's group. Her footsteps echo softly on the courtyard floor as the members of the Tail sect watch her leave in silence. Hong Sarian huffs jealously with her arms crossed, while the protagonist watches the young woman with great suspicion. In the illuminated outer courtyard, several young men from rich clans try to flatter her with exaggerated compliments about her beauty. They bow ridiculously, begging for the honor of having the young woman sit at their respective dinner tables. The young men push each other, vying for her attention in a pathetic and shameful way, right in the middle of the grand courtyard. Suddenly, a maid's desperate scream echoes. Cutting through all the pathetic flattery of the rich hairs, the maid shouts, looking for her mistress in a panic, not knowing that Song Moran has escaped from everyone by climbing the roof. Lying relaxed on the dark tiles, the young woman eats a skewer. Relieved to escape so many annoying flatterers, she reflects on how Jin So-eun was the only interesting warrior who maintained his pride in the face of the night's dangers. The young woman wonders if he truly doesn't fear her sect's power or if he's just a complete fool. Her line of thought is suddenly broken when she spots a suspicious movement happening down in the courtyard. She spots Hong Sarian and the rival sneaking silently away from the main festivities of the temple. She recalls the rumor about a private bank her brother organized only for the younger disciples of the region. The young woman finds it strange that only the two of them are going to the suspicious location without the company of the cunning protagonist. A malicious smile appears on her face as she realizes that this night promises to bring a lot of fun and great revelations. Suddenly, someone knocks gently on the paper door of the room where Song Moran is resting silently. The protagonist opens the wooden door and his eyes widen when he comes face to face with the illustrious visit of Song Moran. He greets her, surprised, asking what would bring the beautiful and influential young woman to his room at such a late hour. She personally invites him to participate in the exclusive youth banquet that her brother organized for the warriors. The young man politely thanks her, but declines the invitation, claiming that he and his companions are exhausted from training. Song Moran smirks, insinuating that perhaps not all members of his sect are so tired. He is paralyzed with shock upon hearing from the young hostess that Hong Sarian has already headed to the banquet. The young man recalls with bitterness that it was at this very youth banquet that he accepted the duel that ruined his father. That historical humiliation was the main reason why he wanted to avoid attending the celebration at all costs. However, he realizes he has no choice but to go and protect her from any trap the rivals may have set. The protagonist suddenly stops in his tracks, determined to confront the young hostess. She looks at him, surprised, when he asks if her own family would be capable of setting a trap for the guests. The young man openly accuses her of playing dumb about the cruel plans her sect has against them. The protagonist wonders if she is truly unaware of the sordid intentions of her father and older brother. She coldly admits that the Teal sect is indeed a major obstacle in their path to the top of regional power. Song Morin proudly states that her prestigious family would never act in such a low and shameful manner. The young man flashes a defiant and wicked smile upon hearing that knave declaration of nobility from Moron. The young man makes an accurate prediction that her brother will try to destroy his sect's reputation relentlessly. He states with conviction that the rival heir will do everything to make them the laughingstock of that night's celebration. She looks away, irritated, and accuses him of being a paranoid man who sees danger in absolutely everything. He continues walking firmly and replies that he would also love it if all this suspicion were just his paranoia. The luxurious pavilion built over the artificial lake shines brightly under the golden lights of its windows. Inside the hall, the Herr Jai Chil Young mockingly gives a speech with a wine glass to the guests. He openly scoffs, saying it's absurd that the bankrupt Tail sect still holds prestige before the alliance. The rival humiliates Hong Serion in front of everyone, calling her sect's special privilege something pathetic. The other disciples start laughing loudly and mocking the embarrassed and awkward silence of the young warrior woman. Hong Serion listens in silence with teary eyes, but feels a huge sense of relief when someone appears in the hall. The rival continues to mock and raises his glass, stating that he prefers to hear the official response from her sect itself. He offers the drink in an outrageous manner and intimidates the young woman, demanding that she agree with the insults uttered. Suddenly, a firm voice echoes through the hall, announcing that the one truly responsible for the answers has just arrived. Her eyes widen and she trembles in shock, immediately recognizing that calm voice from the entrance of the place. The young woman clutches her clothes tightly, holding back tears as silence falls over all the guests. With an extremely swift movement, the protagonist delivers a devastating kick that sends the rival flying with fury. Song Morin enters the party hall imposingly, sparking whispers and admiration from all the guests. A young man tries to invite her to sit next to him, but she coldly refuses, saying she only came as an escort. The defeated rival crawls on the floor in disbelief upon seeing the young master enter the place accompanied by the noble Song Moron. Jinso just gives a cold half-smile and ironically asks who the adversary was referring to. He points his finger and questions if a coward who watches his companion being humiliated even deserves respect. Sarion yells, telling them to stop the fight immediately, and asks what on earth the protagonist is doing there. He feigns innocence, playfully claiming he only came because he was worried she might cause another scene. However, he discreetly glances towards the corner of the room, cautiously analyzing people's reactions. The young man notices that two great prodigies from the richest sects are still talking quietly at the honor altar. That was Namgong-san, a legendary prodigy warrior considered the most brilliant hidden dragon of his generation, and beside him rests the rival Hair Sungmo, Hyan, known for his destructive strength and sadistic temperament. Jai Chil Young rises furiously and asks with disdain if the protagonist decided to meddle in other people's conversations. He smirks, insinuating that the meddling boy will take all the consequences in his companion's place. Jinso remains silent, staring at him with a completely expressionless look, showing no fear. Instead of answering, the boy simply reaches out and grabs a large, juicy chicken leg from the plate. The adversary stares at him, confused and irritated by the insolent attitude of ignoring his challenge to eat chicken. Chewing mockingly, the protagonist prepares to deliver a response that will will leave everyone in the room in shock. Chewing happily, the young man comments that for the new water to be clean, it must come from a purified source. He points to the rival and questions why his sect has not yet been accepted among the 100 most important clans of the Alliance. With a provocative smile, he reveals that the real reason is the bloody internal conflict that occurred 60 years ago. The adversary's eyes widen, and he turns pale upon realizing the protagonist knows his family's darkest secret. He recalls the terrible tragedy in which blood brothers drew their swords and took each other out for control of power. The young man pretends to be understanding and says that although they are strong warriors, their disloyalty is undeniable. He ironically questions who would have the courage to trust their back to a group of traitors in a real battle. Annoyed by the young man's audacity, the opponent slams his glass with extreme violence on the hall's wooden table. Jinso unblinks mockingly and states with cynicism that he prefers to keep his distance from such untrustworthy people. The other warriors present murmur in shock, realizing that the Alliance would indeed hesitate to accept them as allies. Completely beside himself with rage, the enemy advances and violently grabs the collar of the protagonist's robes. He shouts furiously, asking how the young man dares to bring up the most shameful incident in his sect's history. Suddenly, the imposing figure of Jinso, Un's father, appears behind them and demands to know what the aggressor thinks he's doing. Intimidated by the master's terrible presence, the aggressor lets go of the collar and backs away, stammering excuses in fear. The hair Song Mo Hyan approaches and warns that disrespecting a guest of the house is an unacceptable offense for them. He stares coldly at those present, stating that this insult is the same as spitting directly in his sect's face. Morn tries to intervene in the protagonist's favor, but her older brother tells her to stay quiet and not meddle. The hare accuses him of maliciously ruining the banquet's atmosphere to turn the discussion into something ugly. Worried about the imminent danger, Hong Serion bows and offers a sincere apology to take full responsibility. To everyone's surprise, Jinso unpeacefully takes the blame, admitting that he ended up spoiling the celebration. He bows respectfully before the rival hare, claiming he has no justification for his actions. Song Moran watches the apology scene in total shock, unable to understand the cunning young man's peaceful attitude. He also apologizes to the rival from Jiumqing, leaving Hong Serion speechless at such sudden humility. The hare stares at him with a calculating and cold gaze as the protagonist announces that they will be leaving the party. Jinso uncalls the young woman and begins to walk towards the exit, while she follows him, still very confused and trembling. However, the rival hears cold and sharp voice orders them to stop walking immediately before they leave the courtyard. He states with disdain that letting them leave without paying for the insult would completely ruin his sect's reputation. Jinso glances sideways as the enemy boasts of his prestige as the grandson of the organization's supreme leader. The other disciples smile maliciously, aware that the host will not let the incident slide with just words. Song Mo Hyan laughs manically and officially challenges him to a martial arts duel in the courtyard. Seeing her cruel brother's challenge, Song more intenses up, realizing there is no way to avoid the confrontation anymore. Unexpectedly, the protagonist lets out a dark laugh, showing he is very pleased with that reaction. He laughs loudly, celebrating the fact that destiny is finally unfolding exactly as he had planned from the beginning. With a victorious look behind his plan, he is glad to see that his master trap has worked perfectly. Song Moran watches him from afar with great anguish. Fearing the worst for the life of the young disciple she tried to guide, the rival hare points his finger and reiterates the solemn challenge before all the guests gathered in the luxurious courtyard. The young man just cracks a cynical smile, satisfied to have lured his adversary exactly to the point of his revenge. At the inn, he explains to the master that if he hadn't accepted the fight, the rival would have surely attacked young Hong in his place. Hong Sarion intervenes in the discussion with her head down, admitting through tears that her senior did indeed act to protect her. The young man tries to joke to lighten the mood, but she retorts that it doesn't change the fact that he made a risky decision. She asks in distress if he thinks the rival leader's grandson will be an easy opponent to defeat just by luck. The young woman lets out sobs of anguish with a red face, moved by the sacrifice and extreme danger he will face. Desperate at her crying, he asks her to calm down and assures her that he already has a foolproof plan to emerge victorious. Master Kang bellows furiously, saying his unfunny jokes are just making the girl cry even more. Kang demands that the young man's father take drastic action regarding his foolish son, but he just remains silent. Jinso unseriously asks the master not to intervene, guaranteeing he can resolve the whole situation on his own. Master Kang grits his teeth in pure anger and frustration at the boy's unshackable stubbornness in the face of warnings. With no arguments against that determination, the master turns his back, irritated, and gives up trying to convince them otherwise. The father watches him in silence with a worried look, while the young man mentally promises that everything will end well this time. The next day, the imposing headquarters of the Iron Sword sect stands tall under the blue sky for the start of the awaited duel. The younger sister runs desperately towards Jinso, warning him that something very serious has happened. She reveals that the leader of the outer hall is in a complicated situation, leaving the protagonist intrigued. The young man is completely shocked to realize the gravity of what he just heard about his own father. Without losing a single second, he bolts down the corridors to try to prevent the worst. In the training ground of the Iron Sword sect, the worst-case scenario everyone feared has just come true. A huge crowd gathers to gossip about a disciple from the Taya sect who dared to insult the hosts. The young man arrives at the duel site and is faced with a humiliating scene happening right before his eyes. The leaders of the Iron Sword sect watch everything from above with arrogant and mocking smiles. The leader apologizes to the Alliance strategist for the confusion, but the guest tells him to just resolve it quickly. The Miram Alliance strategist finds it absurd that this public humiliation is happening right in his presence. He realizes that the rival sect is fully determined to expel their adversaries from the territory for good. The protagonist's father begs on his knees for mercy and takes the blame for his son's supposed mistakes. The rival leader demands to hear in detail what great, unforgivable offense the Tai heir committed. With his head down and bleeding on the ground, the man admits that his son uttered words that insulted their sect. The rival starts to mock the man's past, but is interrupted by the protagonist's furious shout upon his arrival. Jinso walks calmly through the crowded courtyard and firmly asks his father to get up from the ground immediately. The young man questions why he is humiliating himself like that, but the father says he just wanted to protect his son. The young man retorts that no son would want to see his own father look so pathetic in front of their enemies. With a serious and determined look, Jinso coldly asks the elder to take a step back now. Feeling a mix of pride and concern, the father grits his teeth and clenches his fists tightly. The rival heir scoffs at the family devotion and ironically says the scene is almost tear-jerking. He flashes a malicious smile and orders the protagonist to kneel right next to his father and ask for forgiveness. Without hesitating for a single moment, the young man places his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready to begin the fight. Jinso undraws his blade with style and announces that from this moment on, the situation is no longer in his father's hands. He states that no apology will have any value anymore and insists that his father step away from him. The young man confesses that he just wants to prove to everyone there that he's not the type to just talk and do nothing. He wants to show his true worth while the young woman and the other warriors watch everything with great apprehension. The father slowly backs away and laments in silence for the stubbornness of that young boy who insists on fighting alone. Jinso looks back with determination and promises his father that he will not disappoint him during the difficult confrontation. The tension rises under the clear arena sky as the two adversaries finally prepare for the duel. Song Mo Hyun taunts his opponent with his fingertips and challenges him to show what his sect is really capable of. Then, he wields his giant sword and says he wants to see the real skills of an heir of the 100 Peaks. The rival grew up with every possible resource at his disposal, but the protagonist also has his own advantages. The adversary's heavy blade doesn't work very well against Un's light and extremely fast style. The opponent decides to attack with full force right from the start to try to crush the hair with pure speed. However, the enemy's eyes widen in surprise at the young protagonist's incredibly agile reaction. The swords clash in a brutal blow in the air, and Un manages to block the enemy's attack perfectly. Annoyed at seeing the young man dodge like a rat, the hare grips his giant sword with even more force and hatred. The two exchange swift attacks that create sparks across the arena as they try to find an opening in the defense. The opponent delivers an extremely violent vertical strike, with the goal of splitting his opponent in half for good. The colossal impact shatters the ground and raises a huge cloud of dust and pebbles throughout the combat courtyard. The Alliance strategist watches everything and thinks that the lack of talent in the Taya sect seems to be true after all. In the middle of the dust, the rival smiles arrogantly and mockingly asks if that was all the power the young man had. Un stands firm against the violent impact as sweat drips from his forehead due to the crushing pressure. The enemy ridicules the young man's fighting style, claiming there is nothing impressive about his techniques. The young man regains his balance, plants his foot firmly on the ground, and tells his adversary to shut up once and for all. He charges forward with extreme speed, stating that this deadly confrontation is just beginning for both of them. They resume exchanging fast and intense blows in the air, their gazes entirely focused on their rival's movements. The Taya hare feels the tremendous pressure of the impact and mentally admits that his adversary is too strong. The rival brings his face close with a sadistic smile and asks if there wasn't someone exactly like him in the past. The rival reveals that in the past, a man dared to insult his sect and ended up losing badly to his father. In the past, that proud warrior flatly refused to apologize for a crime he did not commit. As punishment for his audacity, he ended up being cruelly burned with an incandescent metal blade. The brutal punishment left deep burn marks all over his back, chest, and abdomen. With an extremely sadistic and malicious smile, the opponent prepares to reveal who that man was. He reveals that the defeated and humiliated man in the past was none other than Jin Taeson of the Taya sect. The protagonist is hit by a wave of absolute shock as he remembers his father's terrible scars. Completely stunned by the revelation, Un looks back, trying to process all that humiliation. The father just watches his son in silence with a heavy gaze, seeing that secret from the past come to light. Taking advantage of the distraction, the rival lands a violent kick and shouts that he shouldn't look away during the fight. Un is thrown far by the brutal impact and rolls across the stone ground under the crowd's shouts. The young man's companions scream his name desperately upon seeing him hit so directly. The young man struggles to get back up while reflecting on all the pain and humiliation his father swallowed. The opponent scoffs, saying that both father and son are arrogant fools who don't know their place. The spectators in the arena murmur mockingly, agreeing that the Taya sect has always been and always will be pathetic. The enemy leaders smile victoriously on the balcony, certain that the humiliating history is about to repeat itself. With his back turned, Un takes a deep breath and calmly asks if everyone there really believes this great nonsense. The young man mentally prepares to unleash all his strength and put an end to his rival's arrogance for good. The rival confidently advances, delivering a swift blow and mocking the protagonist's sect's simple techniques. With extreme ease, the protagonist dodges the attack by leaning back with extraordinary reflexes. The adversary is perplexed to see his strike fail and to be met with Un's cold and penetrating gaze. The young man counterattacks, delivering incredibly fast strikes that cut through the air with surgical precision. The opponent blocks desperately and panics upon noticing the drastic change in Un's fighting rhythm. He finds himself completely cornered by a flawless technical sequence that seems impossible impossible to predict. Forced to retreat, the rival bellows irritably, demanding to know what kind of dirty trick the young man is using now. With his eyes shining with determination, the Yahello advances, pressing the enemy with even more force. Jinso delivers a devastating sequence of quick cuts that leave his adversary with no chance to react. He executes the modified sword technique in his own style, surpassing all expectations of power. The opponent is hit repeatedly, accumulating cuts on his body while shouting in pain and pure frustration. Without giving the enemy any room to breathe, Jinso continues his relentless and merciless advance. The rival spits blood and leans on his giant sword to avoid falling in front of the entire shocked audience. The protagonist cracks a sarcastic smile and asks if that was the limit of the feared enemy sect's power. Humiliated and furious, the adversary grits his teeth in rage and calls the young man an insignificant insect in the duel. He gathers all his remaining energy and raises his giant blade, determined to crush the hair once and for all. The rival executes his ultimate mountain-breaking technique and brings his enormous sword down with a destructive impact. The thunderous blow cracks the stone floor and makes the spectators retreat in fear of the generated shockwave. The warriors cover their faces, fearing for Jinso's life, as they can't see anything beyond the dust. The opponent continues to deliver brutal blows amidst the cloud of dirt to ensure the protagonist's demise. Blind with pure rage, he shouts that he will crush that damned insect who dared to mock his strength and lineage. To his surprise, Jinso emerges unscathed in the air and parries the attack with unbelievable lightness and precision. The rival panics upon seeing that his most destructive blow was nullified so easily by the young man. Jinso keeps his mind completely focused on the combat as their blades clash consecutively. They exchange quick attacks and sparks fly across the arena amidst the curtain of dust that covers both warriors. The enemy leader watches from afar, horrified to realize that the Taya sect's swordsmanship is too sharp for his son. The Alliance strategist smiles, impressed, noting that the young man's real combat experience is far superior. The audience panics as they see their favorite heir being pushed back in a humiliating manner. The protagonist reflects on all the resentment and injustice of the past that have been carried to this day. He knows that winning this duel will not be enough to break the cycle of suffering and his family's destiny. The rival leaps with everything, shouting that the protagonist's luck will end once and for all at that moment. He advances desperately through the dust and concentrates all his remaining strength into one last attack. Mohyun tries to deliver a final desperate blow with his giant sword against the agile Yahello. The protagonist quickly dodges and touches the adversary's chest, channeling a mysterious spiritual energy. The rival's eyes widen as he feels a sudden weakness and realizes something very strange has just happened. He tries to strike again, asking what kind of trick that is. As Jinso advances decisively, confidently, the hair mentally guarantees that after this day, the rival sect will be humiliated for good. The giant sword flies far through the air as the arrogant Mohyun is thrown back, completely defeated. The entire audience is in absolute shock, with their mouths open at the brutal fall of their warrior. The young rival is sweaty and bloodied, unable to understand how he lost the fight so humiliatingly. Jinso observes his fallen opponent on the ground with a look of total coldness and sovereignty amidst the silence. The enemy sect's huge, heavy weapon falls helplessly and crashes hard against the ground, breaking the stones. Mohyun scrambles away in fear on the courtyard floor, realizing that his grand blade was snatched from his hands with ease. He trembles with hatred and disbelief, unable to accept that he was disarmed by the hair of an inferior sect. The defeated young man can hardly believe that he himself just dropped his sacred sword during actual combat. He clenches his fists, mentally cursing for being humiliated in front of everyone by someone he despised so much. Blind with fury and without his sword, Mohyun charges at the protagonist, shouting with all the hatred he has left. With extreme ease, Jinso just dodges the disordered attack and trips the enemy. The aggressor falls face first onto the stone ground, suffering another shameful fall in front of the Alliance leaders. Bleeding from the mouth, he tries to understand why his movements are so heavy and slow all of a sudden. His powerful grandfather watches everything from the balcony above with an extremely dark and disappointed expression. Mo Hyan coughs up a lot of blood and tries to get back up, stumbling, but his lead simply won't obey his commands. He screams uncontrollably, trying to attack again, only to see the protagonist remain calm and unshaken. Jinso undodges with light steps and watches with disdain the pathetic and clumsy lunges of the tired opponent. The great enemy sword remains stuck in the ground, separating the standing winner from the completely kneeling rival. The injured young man's eyes widen in complete panic as he realizes he can no longer control his internal energy. He tries to concentrate his power, but feels his spiritual flow fail drastically, making his techniques impossible. A strange dark aura envelopes his body, and he trembles as he realizes he can barely hold the hilt of his own sword. Jinso unapproaches and mockingly says that the opponent's internal energy cultivation is too weak for an hair. The rival falls to the ground again ridiculously, unable to accept that he is being overpowered in spiritual strength. He is outraged because he consumed the best elixirs of his sect and is still losing in internal strength. Mo Hyan despairs as he notes he is being completely outmatched by someone he considered weak. The protagonist slowly raises his blade, ready to give a definitive end to the clash under everyone's watch. The fallen rival suddenly remembers the touch he received at the beginning of the fight and begins to suspect something terrible. He perfectly recalls when the young man's hand touched his body and mysteriously drained his energy. Out of his mind, he points his finger and accuses the Yahello of using forbidden sorcery in the official duel. He screams, calling the protagonist crazy and questions if he has any idea who is watching that fight. The defeated young man accuses the boy of being a spy for the demonic cult and demands that the guards capture him at once. The old master watches the humiliation of his kneeling heir, trying to reverse his shameful defeat with lies. With an imposing and firm voice, the supreme leader speaks, demanding immediate silence in the training courtyard. The grandson scrambles desperately, begging his grandfather to believe him, because he clearly felt his energy disappear. Jinso just watches all that pathetic appeal with a serene look, as someone who has planned every step of this. The rival bellows, stating that the protagonist has mastered a forbidden evil art of devouring the heavens and stealing power. The crowd erupts, whispering about the terrible absorption technique that is strictly banned by the Alliance. The grandfather approaches, staring at his fallen grandson who desperately tries to justify his humiliating failure in the duel. The Alliance strategist reflects in silence that terms like forbidden sorcery should not be used lightly. He knows that if the accusation against Jinso is false, the accuser himself will receive an even more painful punishment. The strategist finds the entire scene from the rival sect pathetic and decides to wait for the ideal moment to intervene for good. Jinso stands before the enemy leaders, ready to reveal the whole truth behind the confrontation. He explains that he endured the insults and even tried to apologize, but the opponent insisted on forcing this duel. The heir reveals that the rival's obvious intention was to humiliate Tei and take their place among the great sects. The young man guarantees that he accepted the challenge precisely to prove his sect's strength using only his own ability. Moron is outraged by the rival heir's petty attitude of accusing the young man of sorcery just because he was losing. Jinso states with contempt that the enemy sect has proven it has no dignity to enter the 100 Peaks. The Alliance strategist observes the situation from afar and thinks it's worth watching a little longer before intervening. The crowd starts to gossip, saying that accusing someone of sorcery without real proof is an extremely cowardly act. The defeated rival trembles with fury as he realizes he has just destroyed his own family's reputation with the accusations. Leaning his hand on the ground, he desperately tries to appeal to his grandfather, swearing he is a strong and honorable warrior. He insists that he has never lost to anyone his age, and that he could only have been defeated by sorcery. The opponent solemnly swears before his grandfather that he felt his energy being completely cut off and drained during the fight. fight. He screams uncontrollably, stating that he will accept any punishment if it is proven that he is lying about what happened. The supreme leader of the enemy sect lets out a long sigh at his grandson's desperate and shameful insistence. The old man officially speaks, ordering the martial arts duel to be immediately halted for investigation. Jinso protests, saying it makes no sense to stop a decided fight, but the leader demands to search his body by force. The young man accuses him of trying to frame a smaller sect out of jealousy, but the leader questions if the hair is lying. The protagonist gives a defiant smile and questions how they will pay if he is proven completely innocent of the accusation. The enemy leader shouts furiously, ordering him to be quiet, and states that his arrogance only makes him more suspicious. He bellows that he will inspect his body and hold his entire sect responsible if he finds any sign of forbidden art. Suddenly, the protagonist's voice echoes through the courtyard, calling for his father with great firmness and determination in his eyes. Everyone around watches in total shock and apprehension at the sudden change in attitude the young man is about to take. Jinso undraws his own sword and seriously states that he is willing to offer his own life for the honor of his sect. The father stares at him with wide eyes and a look of pure terror, realizing the extreme decision his son has made. The protagonist asks the hall leader to ensure that no one touches his body if he is taken down or injured right there. With an imposing movement, the young man positions himself and declares that he will defend his family's honor to his last breath. He states that he would rather perish than see his clan's name dragged through the mud by the dirty tricks of that arrogant sect. With his eyes shining with pure fury, he officially challenges the supreme leader of the rival sect to a deadly sword duel. The disciples in the audience panic absolutely, seeing a mere boy have the audacity to challenge the clan's supreme leader. The enemy leader grits his teeth in hatred at such insolence and questions how a brat dares to shout in his presence. He releases an immense amount of spiritual energy that cracks the ground and puts enormous, crushing pressure on the courtyard. The devastating shockwave pushes and knocks down the surrounding warriors, leaving everyone in a panic at the overwhelming power. However, Jinso's father and the master quickly advance and draw their swords to protect the young heir. The protagonist shouts in surprise, seeing his father and the master bravely position themselves right in front of him against the danger. His father roars furiously, telling him to back down and guarantees that no worthy father would send his own son to his demise first. The rival leader laughs evilly and charges with everything, promising to cut off the opposing sect's lineage that very day. The disciples and warriors watch the deadly charge in total panic, fearing that a bloody tragedy is about to happen. Suddenly, a calm and extremely firm voice echoes through the crowded courtyard, ordering all this madness to stop now. The powerful enemy leader halts his deadly attack, stopped by the sudden intervention that appears in the combat arena. The Alliance strategist places himself between the warriors and demands with maximum authority that everyone sheathe their swords. The rival leader retreats, surprised and frustrated, upon seeing the figure of highest political prestige intervene directly in the dispute. The strategist looks seriously at the protagonist and orders him to also put away his weapon without causing more conflict. However, with a look full of determination, Jinso refuses to sheathe his sword before the present authority. The rival leader shouts furiously, calling the young man insolent for daring to disobey the Miram Alliance strategist. The strategist remains calm and asks the young heir to explain the real reason for his audacity and disobedience. Jinso explains that the enemy sect used the duel as a pretext to humiliate them and then cornered him with false lies. He harshly questions where the strategist was while his family was being humiliated and how he can trust his authority. The strategist smiles, finding the attitude very bold, but acknowledges that the young heir possesses uncommon courage. He states that his words carry the full authority of the Alliance, but admits he was watching the fight to intervene at the right time. He silently approaches Jinso and directly asks what the young man truly wants to end the dispute. The protagonist stares at the supreme leader with a piercing gaze and prepares to reveal his most audacious demand. With a cold and decisive voice, he points his sword and reveals that what he wants most is the head of the enemy sect's leader. The strategist gives a discreet sweet smile, finding that extreme demand an extraordinarily bold and courageous move. He realizes that even if the young man loses his life in the fight, he will perish as a martyr and forever destroy the rival's reputation. The strategist smiles, finding the situation fascinating, and realizes that this incident will cause the enemy sect's downfall. He questions the master of the Iron Sword sect if he is confident enough to bet his own sect's name. The old master tries to deflect, stating that investigating forbidden arts is a duty for everyone in the alliance. He proudly guarantees that he will take full responsibility through his own combat strength in the duel. The alliance strategist listens to the proposal with disdain and decides to raise the stakes even higher against the adversary. He challenges the master to also put his sect's legendary sacred weapon as collateral for his innocence in the dispute. Jinso is surprised to see that the alliance master is pressuring the rival leader with such a high stake. The sacred weapon is that family's most precious treasure, and the young man recognizes the strategist's brilliant provocation. The old master panics, claiming he never agreed to bet the greatest treasure inherited from his ancestors. The strategist retorts that if he is sure of the boy's guilt, there is no reason to fear the verification. The spectators whisper that the whole situation is unfair and suspect the supreme leader's real intentions. They begin to think that the enemy sect is just taking advantage of its power to commit a very despicable act. The leader of the Iron Sword sect remains silent under the immense pressure of the whispers and accusations from the packed audience. With no other way to save his honor, he ends up accepting the physical verification proposed by the strategist. The alliance master smiles, satisfied to have gotten the agreement, and turns to Jinso to begin the assessment. The young heir of Taya takes a deep breath and calmly prepares to have his spiritual energy examined up close. The strategist asks him to relax his body and not resist as his spiritual power flows for the inspection. He places his fingers on the protagonist's wrist and begins to guide his energy to check the internal power flow. A strong blue light shines between them under the watchful eyes of the entire silent and tense audience in the duel courtyard. The defeated opponent desperately hopes in silence that any sign of forbidden art will be found. If the boy had learned the forbidden technique, his energy center would contain a confusing mix of various powers. Jinso maintains an expression of total serenity, aware that there is nothing wrong with his spiritual flow. The alliance master deepens his concentration, feeling the young man's energy move perfectly cleanly. His eyes widen slightly in surprise at the extraordinary and flawless cultivation he finds within the young man. Everyone around holds their breath, anxiously awaiting the final verdict that will decide the sect's fate. The strategist removes his hand and officially declares that the protagonist has never learned any type of forbidden art. The old leader of the Iron Sword sect despairs completely, unable to believe that the boy is indeed innocent. The defeated grandson freaks out, screaming that it's a lie and crazily begs everyone to believe his accusation. The rival leader refuses to accept the verdict and decides to check the young man's internal energy with his own hands. Consumed by hatred, he suddenly lunges at the protagonist, catching everyone by surprise with his treacherous attack. The old master hits Jinso's chest with a brutal discharge of electrical energy, showing no mercy. The young heir screams in pain as his father and the master desperately try to intervene against the cowardly aggression. The protagonist suffers from the violent impact and spits a large amount of blood across the training courtyard. The clan's young woman despairs absolutely, screaming for her grandfather to stop the attack before he ends up taking the boy out. The aggressor finally lets go of the young man, who collapses, bloodied, to the ground as the destructive energy dissipates into the air. The father and the master run to support the injured young man, while the strategist condemns the rival leader's insane action. With an extremely dark and intimidating gaze, the strategist demands an explanation for the attack against the young man. The old master trembles as he realizes there was truly no trace of sorcery and that he made a terrible mistake. Bleeding heavily and with trembling hands, Jinso struggles to open his eyes and face his terrible aggressor. He murmurs with difficulty, demanding that the enemy supreme leader pay for that cowardly and despicable act. Supported by his distressed companions on the the ground, the young man demands a formal apology for that injustice. The leader's grandson watches the whole scene in absolute silence, terrified of the consequences of his grandfather's attack. The young woman cries profusely upon seeing the damage caused by the ambition and wounded pride of her own lineage. Jinso points his bloodied hand towards the old master of the Iron Sword sect without showing any fear. With his face covered in blood, he shouts with his last ounce of strength that the rival will have to pay the price for his cowardice. After uttering his final words demanding justice, the young man begins to lose strength and slowly fade. Jinso passes out in the arms of his desperate father, who screams for help amidst the chaos that has erupted in the arena. The entire enemy sect watches in funereal silence at the immense gravity of the mistake their supreme leader has just committed. The Alliance strategist stares coldly at the old man and sternly orders him to fulfill the promise he made. The next day, peace seems to slowly return as the sun shines gently over the Taiya sect's ing. The protagonist finally wakes up, letting out a groan of pain after the violent impact suffered in the previous battle. He slowly opens his eyes, trying to remember the rival sect and the events that led him to that room. Jinso jolts up in bed, shouting furiously for the enemy sect's master who cowardly attacked him. At that moment, a person gently taps on the table, announcing that he has finally woken up from his long rest. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the rat-infested dungeons, the rival heir is locked behind bars. Song Mo Hyan shouts furiously from inside his cell, assuring his grandfather that the opponent did indeed use sorcery in the duel. He grips the bars, desperately begging his grandfather to believe him about the spiritual energy theft. The old master turns his back with contempt, stating that the foolish grandson still hasn't regained his senses after the defeat. He bitterly regrets having thought of passing the sect's command to a fool who destroyed the family's reputation. The grandfather coldly informs him that he will not drink a single drop of water until he properly reflects on his terrible attitude. The heavy dungeon door closes, leaving the rival heir screaming alone in despair in the darkness of the cell. Back in the temple room, the strategist asks if the protagonist's little show has finally come to an end. Jinso feigns surprise upon seeing the strategist sitting calmly at his desk, writing some important documents. The young man tries to play it off by whistling and feigning complete innocence under the master's suspicious gaze. The protagonist mentally realizes that the strategist is too smart to be fooled by silly excuses. Master's huge so. Mayung tells him not to waste time and reveals that he knows all about his tricks. He is considered one of the greatest strategy geniuses on the entire continent, highly respected for his war tactics. The young heir gives in and asks if the master really knew about his whole plan from the beginning of the provocations. The master confirms he knew and reveals how the young man purposely provoked the enemy leader into attacking him. He explains that the protagonist used the Alliance's presence as a shield to avoid a direct confrontation with the master. The strategist reveals that even the blood he spat came from a cut the boy himself made inside his cheek. The old master sets his brush aside on the table and demands to know when the protagonist started planning this whole intrigue. Jinso hesitates for a moment in the face of the man's perceptiveness, while trying to think of a convincing answer. The conversation between the two continues privately inside the beautiful room, surrounded by the temple's tranquility. The young man feels a drop of sweat run down his face as the strategist calmly takes a sip of his hot tea. The Alliance master playfully asks if the young man has forgotten how to speak in response to his direct question. The young man gets out of bed and quickly changes the subject upon noticing a huge weapon resting right next to the table. He excitedly asks if that imposing sword on the table is the legendary sacred weapon that was promised as a reward. With his eyes shining with greed and joy, he immediately asks to examine the valuable conquered treasure up close. The Miram Alliance strategist observes the young man's exaggerated reaction with an expression of total disbelief. He complains, saying he was the one asking questions while the young man is already planning how much he'll sell the sacred sword for, finding the boy's behavior very insolent. The master listens as he confesses he didn't have a long-term plan. The young man reveals that he just used memories from before his return in time to teach the rivals an unforgettable lesson. The experienced strategist observes the young hare in silence, trying to digest that extraordinary explanation. He questions how the young man could have predicted even the exact moment the rival would bring up the sorcery accusation. The protagonist decides to keep it a secret, mentally reasoning that giving the master more details would cost him dearly. Jinso unholds the treasure and mockingly announces that since the strategist helped him win, he has already answered one question. The old strategist scoffs, reminding him that many would pay fortunes for the chance to talk and learn from him. The young man just smiles cheerfully, confirming he has nothing to gain, and bids farewell very casually. The experienced master is left completely speechless at the boy's shamelessness and audacious behavior. He places a small box on the table and says he will answer if the young man details how he predicted the adversary's lie. The protagonist gives a very cunning smirk, ready to smartly negotiate his precious information. He explains that there's no mystery, as it was easy to take advantage of the rival's blind pride and inability to lose. He confesses with a laugh that he just didn't expect the adversary to specifically shout about energy theft. The young man rejoices mentally because even though he used the technique, his special bracelet purified the spiritual flow. Thanks to this mystical secret, not even the continent's greatest strategist could detect the sorcery in his danchan. The protagonist cheerfully changes focus and asks if he can now open the small chest to check his new reward. His eyes widen as he opens the box and comes face to face with the legendary spiritual pills of the feared enemy sect. Jinso celebrates and gives many thanks for the rare pills obtained, while the master observes him in total silence. The strategist gets up and questions why the young man didn't defeat the rival cleanly if he was so sure of victory. Jinso explains that if he had won easily, everyone would say it was luck, and he wanted to shut the enemy sect up for good. He questions what would have happened to his family if he hadn't been there to defend them from that false accusation. The young man confesses that even in his passing, his body would prove his innocence and keep his sect's honor completely clean. The alliance strategist becomes thoughtful and questions if the hare was really willing to risk his own life. He finds it absurd that the young man risked everything for a reason he considers of minor importance to the sects. Annoyed by the master's words, the protagonist clenches his fist with great force and determination. Jinso unfocuses his gaze on his guest and refuses to accept his family's dignity being treated with disdain. The atmosphere in the room becomes quite tense as the two warriors exchange extremely serious and challenging glances. He questions if the great and renowned Juge family considers the honor of a minor sect as something insignificant. The young hare firmly asks if the Taya sect doesn't have the right to fight with all its might to defend its name. The strategist's eyes widen slightly in surprise upon encountering the unwavering courage of that young warrior. Suddenly, he lets out a genuine laugh, stating that supporting the protagonist is something extremely fascinating. The young man doesn't understand the old man's laughter and realizes that he is truly someone out of the ordinary. Satisfied with the amusement, the master decides to hand a second, very mysterious prize to the hare. Jinso unobserves the object with great curiosity, realizing it is an important admission plaque. His eyes widen in complete shock as he deciphers the true utility and enormous value of that rare gift. The item is a free pass to the prestigious Miram Academy, allowing the bearer to enter without taking the terrible exam. Holding the plaque tightly, the young man realizes that he can now send another Tai disciple to the famous academy. Moved, he gives his thanks while the master demands that after graduation, the young man work in his pavilion of connections. Jinso is shocked as he remembers the terrible reputation of exploitation and overwork at that office. In his past, he heard that the pavilion of 10,000 dragons, employees work late and never get married. The strategist smiles somewhat frighteningly and assures him that he is already reserving a special spot for the boy. The young man is confused when the old master jumps out of the room's window, even though there's a door right next to it. The strategist says goodbye with a loud laugh and tells the young man not to take too long to join him in his great pavilion. Jinso unscreams desperately, trying to stop the man from leaving, but it's too late to escape that fate. The old master flies away cheerfully, celebrating that the pavilion of 10,000 dragons is about to get very lively. The next day, the atmosphere at the imposing headquarters of the Iron Sword sect seems considerably quieter. Song Moran watches the guests leave the courtyard from under the shade of a beautiful tree with purple flowers. She sadly recalls her grandfather's words, threatening to blame everyone if the heir didn't prove his innocence. She remembers her grandfather's blind fury, accusing the boy of sorcery without even considering the possibility of defeat. She also remembers the bloodied protagonist angrily warning that they would pay a very high price for that cowardice. The young woman recalls the moment she shouted to defend the dignity and honor of her own family in that duel. Morin looks away with great sadness, realizing that her relatives' actions have destroyed the clan's reputation. Suddenly, Jinso whispers in her ear, asking what she's doing there alone, and startles the young woman, who lets out a scream. She turns around, startled, and is speechless when she comes face to face with the protagonist carrying his things to leave. Morin stammers nervously and fidgets with her hands, unable to find the right words to start a conversation. She musters up her courage, lowers her head, and says that the young man acted in an extremely reckless and dangerous way in the dispute. Jinso looks at her with curiosity and questions what exactly she means by calling him reckless. She looks up seriously and questions why he went so far and risked his own life in the duel. The young woman asks why he had to act in such an extreme and dramatic way right in front of all the alliance leaders. She remembers the strategist questioning if it was worth putting one's life on the line for something considered insignificant. The young man retorts by asking if she thinks his sect should just accept the cowardly humiliation with their heads down. He looks at her seriously and questions if that was the kind of submissive behavior she expected from him in the duel. Morin despairs, gesturing with her hands, and assures him that's not what she meant by her comment. The young woman looks away and falls silent, realizing that her words may have hurt the hearer who only defended his honor. She remains silent for a few moments, feeling the weight of guilt and shame for her arrogant grandfather's actions. With a heavy heart, the young woman lowers her head under the falling petals and offers a sincere apology for what happened. She fears that a simple apology might not be enough, but the boy says he understands and asks her to lift her head. Morin looks up, surprised by the generosity and maturity shown by the young Taya heir. He states that he accepts her sincere apology because he knows it would be impossible to get one from the rival leader. Morin stammers that she will try to talk to her grandfather to ease the situation, but the young man calmly interrupts her. He gently says with a warm smile that there is no need to continue dragging on this cycle of misfortune. The young woman looks at him with teary and bright eyes, deeply moved by Jinso's maturity and kindness. The young man walks, carrying his new treasure, and advises the young woman to take responsibility by changing the sect from within. Resting the enormous sword on his shoulders, the heir begins to walk away slowly, leaving Moran thoughtful with his advice. He smiles under the purple flowers and remembers that in the end, all sects are part of the same Morim alliance tree. The young woman silently watches the young man's departure, deeply touched by his noble and wise words. The protagonist walks away under the shower of purple petals from the sacred tree, leaving the young heiress thoughtful in the courtyard. She reflects bitterly on the arrogant attitudes of her own brother and her proud grandfather the day before. She realizes that their inability to offer a single sincere apology ended up creating such a shameful situation. In a cute virgin, Morin wipes her tears with her arm, trying to regain her dignity as a clan warrior. The protagonist panics when he sees her cry and jokingly says that tears don't suit a strong swordswoman. The young heiress shyly approaches and offers him a beautiful black box containing a very special reward. The boy is surprised, wondering if it's his birthday, while the young woman explains that the gift symbolizes her desire for peace. Upon opening the small wooden case, the protagonist is left completely breathless by the valuable content in his hands. It is a legendary steel protection pill, an extremely rare elixir reserved only for direct heirs. Moron glances sideways with a red face, silently hoping that the Taya heir will accept her humble peace offering. The young woman shyly admits that she completely understands if he cannot forgive her family's wrongdoings. Jinso unjust accepts the gift with a friendly smile and gently asks her to lift her head without fear. The girl gives a relieved smile and thanks him from the heart. Realizing that the young man indeed holds no grudge against her, the protagonist puts the mystical pill away and bids the young woman farewell with a cheerful wave. Preparing to return to his clan, Moron watches him walk towards the exit with a light heart, full of hope for a better future between the sects. The young man walks away victoriously, carrying the rival sect's greatest treasures and a very valuable promise of friendship. The Alliance Master watches the entire farewell from the balcony and smiles, noticing the young Taya heir's cleverness. He realizes that the protagonist not only won the duel, but also won over the Alliance and the rival sect's Harris. The old strategist Silhouette disappears in the room's window as the young man continues his journey back home. The heir walks cheerfully down the road, eager to show off all the incredible rewards he obtained in the confrontation. With the sacred sword on his back and the rare pills in his pocket, Jinso feels more than ready to strengthen his clan. The next day, the doors of the Taya sect's inn open, and the master and disciples welcome the heir back. The young Hong runs excitedly towards the young man, with a broad smile on her face. Seeing that her senior has returned completely safe, the clan master and Jinso's father also approach, relieved to see that the boy's bold plan worked perfectly. The younger disciples jump for joy around their hero, while the master congratulates everyone on the great achievement. The leader of the Taya clan gives a proud smile and confesses he couldn't even sleep from so much worry about the duel's danger. He gathers all the hall leaders and disciples in the central courtyard to celebrate their sect's historic victory. The leader remembers that for 150 years, the sect endured humiliations in silence due to lack of strength and incompetence. He celebrates the fact that Jinso brilliantly solved what none of the clan's adults could do before. His father watches the young man with teary eyes, feeling deeply grateful and at the same time ashamed of his weakness. The sect leader laughs cheerfully, wiping away a tear, and suggests they organize a grand banquet to celebrate. However, the protagonist's father energetically refuses the idea, claiming that a banquet would destroy the clan's budget. The leader tries to argue that the occasion is special and that their honor was defended, but the father retorts that honor doesn't fill billies. To save the banquet's festive mood, the sect leader decides to reach into his own pocket and donate his money. The other hall leaders join the good deed and also start pulling out their coin purses to help with the party costs. They laugh and thank everyone for their generosity while the protagonist watches this amusing union from a distance. The young man hugs the children, laughing, and asks the master if they will really have a feast fit for kings at the inn today. However, his father approaches with a frightening expression and pretends to be going deaf, so he won't have to pay for any banquet. In a comical scene, the father runs off with the bags of money, promising to buy meat for the clan's next 6 months. Jinso watches his father walk away cheerfully and gives a tender smile, seeing that he has finally returned to his normal self. The blue sky shines over the peaceful Taya sect, which finally breathes a sigh of relief, victorious after so many provocations. Later, the rare pills obtained are divided between the heir and the young Hong so that both can advance their cultivation. Meanwhile, in a closed room, a businessman uses an abacus to calculate the huge profits of his merchant organization. Jin Taizan despairs over the finances and complains that refusing the 3 inns for 1 pill was a total waste. He remembers that the merchant had offered 3 entire inns if they handed over the mystical pill to his son. The merchant complained that Taya had always been humiliated, while his own son just drank and watched without acting. But the sect leader firmly refused the offer, claiming that his lineage's pride could not be sold so cheaply. The father bangs his head on the table, crying and bellowing that with the profits from those inns, they could buy several pills a year. Jinso unsmiles, realizing that despite his complaints, his father is deep down proud of the sect leader's firm stance. The young man decides to leave the room and tells his father he's going for a walk to earn the money they so desperately need. His father shouts, asking how he plans to get money, but the young man laughingly tells him not to underestimate his son. The elder bellows irritably, demanding to know where the young man is going, while the protagonist already knows his exact destination. Jinso gives a very confident and cunning smile, knowing perfectly well where to find a great fortune for the clan. The Taya arrives at the bustling Wanga village, a region well known for its prosperous trade and wealth. In the village streets, travelers and locals seem a bit tense and whisper among themselves about a worrying rumor. He passes by the imposing Wanga mansion, which belongs to one of the 3 richest merchant families on the entire continent. People gossip about the stunning beauty of the mansion lord's daughter. Although no one has seen her in person, a man walks hurriedly through the beautiful corridors of the enormous mansion, showing great concern on his face. The mansion master's large shadow projects before the imposing wooden doors of his beloved daughter's room. With care and affection, he pushes the heavy, creaking metal doors, revealing the interior of the young woman's chilly room. The lord of the mansion, Wang Jum, Sen enters the room with a broad smile on his face, cheerfully announcing his return. The sound of constant coughing echoes in the place as we see a plate of fruit covered in a thick layer of ice. Children's dolls also appear completely frozen on the cold room's floor due to the young woman's mysterious condition. In the center of the ice-covered room, the daughter is sitting huddled and calls out to him softly upon noticing her father's arrival. The beautiful and pale young woman, Wang Soso, greets her father with a weak smile while trying to resist the cold of her room. The father kneels beside her and asks how her day was, and she replies that she spent the whole time doing new embroidery. She proudly shows her ice-covered embroidery and says she would like to use it to make a new outfit for her father. Moved by his beloved daughter's affection, the man praises her talent, assuring her the outfit will look wonderful. He filled his daughter's room with ice to cool her body, as she suffers from a mysterious and deadly fever. The father asks the doctor if this treatment will save his daughter, but the doctor warns it will only delay the terrible symptoms. The doctor explains with regret to the mansion lord that his daughter's body suffers from an overheating that has no cure. He reveals the terrible medical prognosis that young Soso will likely not make it past the age of 20. Knowing her birthday is near, the father asks if she wants any gift, and the young woman thinks of a special request. She blushes and shyly confesses that her greatest and most sincere wish would be to visit the village market. Soso explains that she has spent her whole life locked up with sealed windows and has always wanted to know what the outside world is like. She apologizes for making such a selfish request, but her father just listens in silence with a heart full of sadness. In fact, the father reveals that he secretly had a special carriage built exclusively for her. He explains that the vehicle will have a system to keep the air cold and allow her to go out and take rides whenever she wishes. The young woman is overjoyed with the news and jumps into her father's arms to celebrate that incredible birthday gift. She cries with happiness, thanking her father very much for making her dream of seeing the world outside her frozen room walls come true. The man is deeply moved to see his daughter's radiant smile, feeling that all the effort was worth it. He mentally swears he would spend his entire immense fortune without hesitation if it meant saving his daughter's life. The sunset gauds the sky above the magnificent mansion, which holds the terrible secret of the young Harris's incurable disease. Night falls silently on the place, and a worrying calm envelops the entire property of the rich merchant family. In the frozen room, the father finds the room empty and only finds a note left on the stone floor. He trembles with pure terror and fury upon reading the words on the paper, informing him that his one and only beloved daughter has been taken. the man lets out a crazed scream of rage, demanding to know who committed this atrocity and dared to invade his property. He summons all his guards and orders them to hunt down the kidnappers, promising a gigantic reward for the young woman. The mansion lord swears to pay a fortune fit for a king to any warrior who can bring his daughter back. Jinso unobserves the wanted poster on the village notice board while the residents whisper anxiously about the disappearance. The protagonist gives a cunning smile full of ulterior motives. Realizing his great chance to profit has arrived, he takes off at a run through the dark forest, cutting through the wind with extreme agility towards the criminal's trail. Jinso runs swiftly between the trees with a branch in his mouth, focused on rescuing the young woman and getting the legendary reward. Jin Taizan continues to complain, stating that the Ryung merchant group is just trying to force a business transaction. He warns that their friendly relationship with the merchants will end the moment they hand over the sacred pill. Leaping through the tree branches, the protagonist reflects that his sect needs a sponsorship based on real gratitude. He plans to get a sponsorship so grand that it can cover his clan's entire financial deficit in one go. Jinso gives a victorious smile, imagining the moment he will appear as the heroic savior of the situation. The young man finally arrives at the exact location of the captivity and spots the old abandoned wooden cabin in the middle of the forest. He tries to pull from his past life's memories some cases of kidnappings involving young girls in that region. Jinso remembers that in most cases, the victims were dealt with if the ransom took too long to be paid. He lands silently on the cabin's roof, knowing the young woman's body would be buried right next to it if he failed. He peeks through a small crack in the roof's wood to analyze the movements of the kidnappers inside. The young hare plans to invade, but is caught by surprise when one of the kidnappers shouts that there is a serious problem. The bandits notice with alarm that Wong Soso's body is suddenly overheating and glowing like a ball of fire. The Tai hare is confused, noticing that in his previous memories, there was never any mention of the young woman's illness. The kidnapper draws his sword and decides they have no choice but to eliminate and hide the young hostage's body. The moment the bandits raise their weapons to take her out, Jinso breaks through the wooden roof and drops down to protect her. With agile movements, he lands a fatal blow on the first attacker's back, who collapses with a groan of pain. The other kidnappers panic absolutely and draw their swords, demanding to know who the mysterious intruder is. The Tai hare begins a swift and relentless combat, defeating the enemies with extreme agility in the darkness. Wong Soso hears the bandits' cries of pain and slowly opens her eyes. Seeing the silhouette of her savior, almost without strength, she watches the young man approach as the kidnappers fall defeated on the old cabin floor. The protagonist analyzes the untied young woman and is startled to realize her body is burning with an extreme fever. Jinso touches Wong Soso's forehead and notes that her temperature is too high to be just a common symptom of fever. The young woman murmurs with great difficulty due to extreme exhaustion, while the hare asks if she can hear him. She asks, frightened, who he is, and the young man calmly introduces himself as Jin So-un, the young hare of the Taiya sect. The young man lies, pretending he was just taking a walk in the forest at night when he heard strange noises coming from the cabin. He strikes a heroic pose, guaranteeing that as an honorable warrior, he could not turn his back on someone in danger. Wong Soso thanks him weakly and promises that her father will reward him with an immense fortune for saving her life from danger. The protagonist suggests taking her to a doctor immediately upon noticing her weakness, but the young woman panics and asks him to stop. She explains that she suffers from a rare condition that burns her entire spiritual flow if she forces her body movements. Jinso is intrigued to hear about the burning of acupuncture points and tries to find out what kind of rare disease it is. The hare decides to close his eyes and concentrate to search his vast memories from his past life for a logical answer. Thanks to his perfect memory, he remembers the immense library of medical texts from the Alliance that he studied before his return. He guides his mental focus through the imaginary shelves, looking for a specific book that deals with fever and acupoints. His mental search advances quickly through the ancient traditional medicine scrolls kept by the Miram Alliance. Jinso recalls the countless medical manuals he memorized and is sure there is a record of that fever, His mind finally finds and focuses on the exact spot where the answer to that dangerous bodily condition is stored. He finds the Compendium of 10,000 Jars, a classic medical text that details rare diseases and their respective cures. The book explains that an extreme fever that burns the acupuncture points can cause irreversible damage throughout the body. The medical record reveals that the condition is known as solar constitution and can only be alleviated with the help of cold air. The hare understands that this is not a simple common illness, but a dangerous birth characteristic. With a serious expression, he realizes with concern that the solar constitution is an anomaly that indeed has no cure. So Woon is shocked to realize the girl was born with the solar constitution and feels sorry for the situation she is in. He remembers that in his past life, the Lord spent his entire fortune searching for Wong Soso, but never found her. He deduces that the kidnappers must have harmed her and hidden her away after realizing she was fading. The young man suddenly stops and begins to wonder if her true problem is actually this solar constitution. He asks himself if that method would work, while the girl timidly calls out to him from the floor. With a serious expression, the protagonist decides to approach her and addresses her as young lady. He reveals that he might know a special way to change her constitution and save her. The young lady turns bright red and is left speechless by this unexpected revelation. The two remain alone in the wooden room while the young man waits for her response. Trembling quite a bit, she begs with all her might for him to tell her what the method is. Desperate, she says she would do anything to survive and asks for his help once more. Startled by her reaction, the young man asks her to calm down and says she shouldn't trust strangers so easily. She explains that she knows how to recognize someone who truly wants to help, especially since he saved her from the kidnappers. He accepts her reasoning and decides to explain every important detail before beginning the treatment. He tells her about a supreme master from the past who was born with a rare lunar constitution. Because of this special condition, she was able to reach the peak of ice martial arts. However, she couldn't have children, and because of that, she begged the divine doctor to change her body. It turns out that this legendary doctor discovered a way to invert extreme constitutions. He explains that inverting the method should work for her, but warns that there is a big catch to the process. The young man explains that she will need to take Tak Pilksik daily and cultivate only the energy of his sect. She says she doesn't mind that, as she has no intention of becoming a martial artist. Her greatest desire is simply to experience simple things like walking with her family and holding the hand of someone she loves. She cries softly, confessing that growing old in peace is the only thing she truly wants. He reflects on how her wealth would mean nothing if she couldn't enjoy everyday life. Given this, the protagonist agrees to her request and begins to prepare himself to act. Suddenly, he realizes that the enemies have arrived, leaving the girl confused by his warning. Before she can ask anything, the young man strikes her neck to make her faint. He apologizes while catching her carefully so she doesn't get hurt when she hits the floor. He knows it would be very problematic if she or her family discovered his true identity. Outside, several shadows of mysterious warriors begin to surround the cabin in the middle of the night. The masked leader orders everyone to invade quickly to ensure the hostage remains under control. He warns that no one should use the clan's sword technique so they don't reveal their secret identity. But the protagonist appears on the roof, mocking them all and mentioning the noble Namgoon clan right in front of them. Totally surprised by that sudden appearance, the invaders demand to know who the intruder is. The young man climbs down from the roof with his sword in hand, saying he is just someone there to ruin their plans. The leader is furious and knows they cannot leave any witnesses alive to tell that story. Not caring at all, the young man says he already knows them very well and reveals that they belong to the merchant group. The masked man freezes upon hearing the name of his true master and wonders how the young man knows so much. He even mocks them, saying he knows the real reason for the kidnapping, which was to sabotage the influential Wonga family. Knowing their secret has been completely uncovered, the leader releases his dark energy to attack. The henchmen charge forward using the famous forbidden sword technique of the Namgung clan all at once. The young man breaks into a wild smile seeing that they fell right for his trap and used that technique. He easily blocks the combined strikes, showing that he is in total control of that fight. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist hits the face of one of the masked men with precision. Surprised by his absurd agility, the enemies call him a coward while trying to defend themselves. He ignores the insults and lands another devastating blow, knocking another opponent to the cold floor. The young man mocks their complaints, asking if a group attacking one person alone has any right to speak. Irritated by the provocation, one of the men prepares the second form of the powerful sword technique. The young man pretends to be surprised and scoffs upon seeing that the adversary can use that technical variation. He easily dodges the attacks and even gives tips on how the enemy should have executed the move. The enemy screams in frustration, accusing the young man of mocking him and unable to understand how his strikes are being predicted. He becomes thoughtful and breaks into a cold sweat, unable to accept that a mysterious nobody is so incredibly skilled. He is even more shocked to see the supreme sword technique of the Namgung clan being totally surpassed in such a humiliating way. Holding his sword tightly with a dark aura, the leader says the young man got lucky, but now he should watch out. He prepares to use the definitive secret technique of his clan, which promises to end that battle once and for all. The masked warrior charges at impressive speed in the direction of the young protagonist. He focuses his gaze entirely on the target, demonstrating extreme determination to carry out the perfect strike. The masked man screams that his power is at a level that an ordinary boy would never be able to predict. Several beams of light cut through the air as the great technique is executed with all the warrior's strength. But suddenly, the masked leader himself is the one spitting blood violently after being struck in the chest. The young man's counter attack is so fast that it completely destroys the opponent's offense in seconds. The protagonist lands calmly on the ground with his sword in hand, while all the enemies fall defeated. Totally beaten, the leader mumbles on the floor, unable to understand how he was surpassed so easily. He is in shock to see that the secret technique and pride of his clan was simply shattered by a stranger. The young man mocks his surprise, asking if he really thought the Namgung sword was invincible. He reveals that the Namgung clan doesn't even know of the existence of a secret formula created to break their own technique. With the fight over, the young man puts his weapon away and begins to walk back to the small cabin under the starry night. He opens the wooden door silently so as not to attract anyone's attention nearby. Now that the external threat has passed, the protagonist prepares to perform the treatment he promised. With a confident smile on his face, he announces that he will begin the medical procedure to save the young Miss Wong. The girl remains unconscious on the floor, while the young man positions himself beside her to apply the healing technique. Silence takes over the forest, while time passes, and the night follows its natural course around the cabin. The sun finally rises, lighting up the area and indicating that a new morning has begun after that eventful night. Now awake, the young lady adjusts her clothes timidly and says she has a very important request to make. Blushing deeply, she asks with a gentle look if she can affectionately call him Big Brother from now on.